everybody. I hope you are well and good. We are here doing the podcast that is the Lightbringers. I don't know why my mic is lower than it normally is today, but it just is. So there might be a few audio fun times. Enjoy that while that occurs. Otherwise, there's myself, and we have some amazing personages that will be joining myself when I actually put their microphones on. There we go. And they might be very loud for a second.
Hello!
Hello.
Do you know these gays? Do you know these gays?
Who am I? I don't know.
Wait, what? What is happening?
Y'all seen White Lotus?
I've not seen that
Oh, I
yet.
haven't seen it yet.
No.
Oh, I thought you were just generally asking, do you know those gays? And I was like, who am I? Do we ever really know ourselves? I don't know.
I put off watching it, but then I binged both seasons in 2 days, and it is very much worth it.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right.
White Lotus. Okay, I have heard about that. There is the hearing of it, but that's all I've done so far. Oh no, there was the thing on Twitter. I saw that as well. Okay.
Yeah, I am curious about it. We got a lot of good TV coming out right now, honestly.
Very true. This is not a TV podcast, but
Welcome to our totally a podcast about TV, and I guess sometimes Guild Wars too. The Lightbringers podcast.
We can do that for sure. Okay, everyone, let me know as well in the chat if the audio or visuals are a little bit dodgy, because it's the first stream I've done with us doing gameplay, so I'd appreciate that very much if you could do that. Oh, interesting. This peasant is just floating past me. That's cool. I'm just gonna switch to in-game footage so you can see that. Hi, peasant. That is also a good half surfer. Okay.
Well, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on this map. Least of all, meta that's about to start, Jebro. So
they got
That's
their
true.
heelys on.
Sorry.
They wanted to be cool.
They got their heelys on. Have you seen that guy who does the Instagram posts? He's like, he does all these like, you know, skateboard videos where they have the tricks and they like jump off stuff and they do the things. He's like doing it in heelys, like metal music and stuff. Yeah. And he's like got the t-shirts and he said, "Oh, make sure you have your feelies when you're wearing your heelys," or something like that. I love those things.
My God.
Anyway, sorry. This is a podcast called The Lightbringers. We're doing about meta events in Guild Wars 2 today. Meta events are an amazing opportunity for many, many, many players to get involved. Casual or not, you can enjoy the things. Wow, everyone's characters look so good. We're going to be doing some in-game footage with us talking about the events as well. I also didn't advertise anywhere. So while I do that and just press send on all the things, we're going to do a little bit of an intro. Kroof, tell us what you do and where you do it.
I think I'm in a job interview with a very unexpected question. I'm a little stressed now. But hi everyone, I'm Kroof. I do a lot of YouTube videos over on my channel at Kroof, and I also stream here on Twitch. I just returned to streaming this week because all of my PC parts are back to working and everything is hopefully not going to dislodge and malfunction anytime soon. So I'm excited to be back. And also, face cam. First time back, so thank you for being here. And,
Look at that amazing, handsome face. Just look at it.
do you have time to talk about our Lord and Savior, Jennifer Coolidge? No? Do you have enough time to talk about me? Okay, great.
It's just you. It's just you at the moment. That's what we're focusing on. But thank you very much, Kroof. At Kroof. YouTube. Twitch. All the things. Fornex. Welcome back. Hello. Tell us all the things. What do you do, where you do it. Hello.
Hey, I'm Fornex. I'm the Crichton Herald. I make Guild Wars 2 content on YouTube and chat with you guys once a week, which is really lovely. And that's what I do. And there's a new video coming out tomorrow, all the Fashion Wars, all my favorites from the entire game, from vanilla right through to End of Dragons. So,
really?
Yeah, just the armors, not like everything, because that would be bonkers. But yeah, that's what's coming out tomorrow.
Just the armor. Okay.
Just the armors. Yeah.
That's fine.
That
works.
That's all there is. There isn't any more. That's it.
Just it. Fornax has a new body this week as well.
Well,
It's like changing it up.
25% less head. Please don't clip that. But no, yeah, 25% less head is what it is. Yeah.
The Lightbringers podcast now is 25% less head.
That's a real selling point.
There is 25% less head.
We are missing boots.
We are missing boots, so there's 25%.
There is a sacrifice that has been made.
It's a boot.
There is, yeah.
Just the singular booty. Rookery, tell us what you do when you do it.
Hi, I'm Rookery. This week I have 25% more head, weirdly enough. And also, my face is not as good as Kroof's, but whose really could be? Nobody's. But, you know, if you still want to hang out regardless, you can find me around the internet over at my Twitch channel, twitch.tv Rookery. That's spelled ROOKURI. We play a lot of games there. I'm usually live 2 to 3 days a week on that channel specifically. And then I'm on this podcast on Fridays, as well as 8th Right Radio for Final Fantasy XIV on Saturdays over on Gamer Escape. I've also been doing a lot of not just playing and talking about and being a big goof and just loving the games that we play, mostly MMORPGs and specifically Guild Wars 2 and Final Fantasy XIV. I haven't just been doing that. I've also been being my big goober self as well, doing a lot of shoutcasting. So next week, just starting in, we're having another event that's going to be happening over in Final Fantasy XIV, the Race to World First for their new Ultimate fight that I'll be shoutcasting all week. So it's been a really interesting journey here this last year, getting more into that casting, hosting, and I've been having a blast. So again, if I'm not live on my own channel, there's a good chance I'm doing something somewhere around the internet, and you can always keep up to date, especially if you follow me on Twitter, which is at @rookery_.
Excellent. Thank you everyone for joining us. And if you want to check out this podcast on a Friday, twitch.tv/Jebro Unity around 1 p.m. Pacific-ish, kind of sometimes on a Friday, hopefully. Not next week, though. Next week, we will be having a small break as I'm getting my tattoo finished. Yes, it needs to be done. It's the only day I have off, really. Other than Saturday and Sunday, but those are my days for doing gaming. So, what we're going to be doing, everyone, is we're going to be going into game, talking about meta events. But first of all, we're in Sietung Province later now. Wow, you have all the flashy mounts. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to put us in game because interesting for you to see our...
Oh my god, Tony the Tiger, I love you. They're great.
It is, isn't it? It is. I thought so.
You like frosted flakes.
It's very good, very good.
I like
I don't think
frosted
I've ever had
flakes.
frosted flakes.
He's a very good boy.
Don't
very,
eat
very
those
good
ones
boy.
though, because they're very sugary. Eat like their Trader Joe's ones or whatever.
Oh, is that like the asbestos popcorn on the ceiling?
Exactly,
Oh, you're talking about like off-brand. Oh,
I'm talking about
okay.
off-brand. Go for off-brand stuff. Yeah, normally that's better. Okay. Normally, but probably worse, actually. Less sugar. Anyway, they are hard today. Words are very hard today. I had a lot of blood taken earlier. So I'm kind of feeling a little bit loopy.
Well, we didn't know about that.
No, you
That
didn't.
sounds very grim. I've had a lot of blood taken earlier today.
I did. Okay. We're going to be doing this event while we talk about the things where it's not started yet. Oh no, actually, I think it's just started.
It just started.
Seconds.
What we're doing is we're talking about meta events. So what if you had to describe what a meta event in Guild Wars 2 is? What would you say it is? I mean, do they even call them meta events? Like, I don't think they even call them meta events, do they? What are they? They just map. What do they call them? They call them metas
I
now.
think they were like back in the day. They were always just called dynamic events, but then
Yeah.
when they began to have more of an overarching story to the map, I think that's when the word meta kind of shifted into the scene a little bit more.
True.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as like the overarching narrative of the map, whether it's a specific struggle, moment in time, or part of the actual story itself, that it is a chain of like culminating dynamic events that have to be completed in various ways that then leads to something distinctive, a culmination of that action, that narrative, in either like a world boss fight or some kind of other encounter that is like a peak of the action. And some of the metas can have multiples of those, kind of like with Drizzlewood Coast, where we have, you know, the sort of middle fight and then we have the big world boss at the end. But to me, it is like the overarching larger scale momentum of a map that you can play through and can culminate for specific rewards that has a bunch of different like smaller steps, chain events, things like that, that then leads you to the climax of the action, if that makes sense.
It does make sense indeed. Okay,
Yeah.
come and help me stop the looting, I guess, over here, supposedly. Maybe. There's people hovering. Yes, that's actually a really good way of talking about it, honestly. The one thing about Guild Wars 2 that makes it very unique is the fact that it has these, because there isn't really many games that do. They emanate from... So if you're a new or casual player and you've just started playing Guild Wars 2, there are like kind of events, right, that go on in the game, but they're dynamic, right? Which is kind of what Kroof was saying. And they are, so meta events, I think, you know, they kind of just bigger. They're just zone wide, like Rookery said, very well described. There's kind of, sometimes there is a progression to them. Sometimes there is, I think sometimes people count boss events as them, which, you know, obviously if you think about things like Auric Basin, or you think about Dragon's End, you think about all these other ones, they culminate in a boss. So they're kind of just map-wide events which culminate in a boss. Or some events. Are there any of meta events which don't?
Ooh, you could kind of consider the event in the Desert Highlands from Path of Fire as being the one map that does not have a traditional meta event. They have a very map-wide dynamic event where you have to go around and find treasure chests, but it never culminates into a boss fight or any like big climactic moment where everyone gathers in a single place to accomplish a puzzle or a goal or anything. So that might be the one map, especially in an expansion, that doesn't have a traditional meta event.
Yeah, I mean, Path of Fire was a little bit strange in how it almost tried to deviate to some extent from the map metas that had been so like beloved in Heart of Thorns. So I think that is where we see some of the maybe differences or metas that maybe don't even feel quite as like distinctive as in other parts of the game. Like there are still some that definitely follow more of the traditional formula, but Path of Fire, it seemed like they were almost for a second trying to decide if they wanted to still do map meta. Maybe that's just like, it felt like maybe they were trying to lean away from that to some extent.
Which in retrospect is almost like shocking,
Yeah.
just due to how successful they were in Heart of Thorns, the very first expansion, and how successful they continue to be.
And I would never forget what you said, Griff, when we were talking about endgame stuff, and you were like, kind of meta events. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, really, if you think about it, the thing that everyone can take part in, and there is no real lack of access other than if there's a map which isn't running it because there's just not enough people. It's this. Like, this is the thing that everyone can take part in. You don't really need... I mean, if you do know what to do, like, that's very, very helpful because some of them are more difficult. But you can just jump into a lot of these and get them completed, to be honest. They're not, like, the most difficult thing in the world, especially because of, like, power group.
And even if you're not in a map that is active, meta events interact with the LFG probably the best because it isn't requiring you to have a very structured composition. It's just a bunch of people in a map, so it's very like low stakes and you can just easily join and then join on that person's map. It's not like strike missions where it takes more time to cultivate a group. It's very easy to get into.
Yeah, and it's been a very rare occurrence that I've ever been in Guild Wars 2 and had any of these map metas. Like, sure, there are sometimes a map instance or something where I'm going, oh, there's not people running it, or, you know, obviously we just don't have enough to push the meta on this map. But I can't really think of a time, maybe once when I was on at a weird hour or something and a meta was up, I couldn't find a group to run it or something. But like, for them being such huge efforts, they do seem to be some of the most widely run and most accessible content in the game. And if you're looking at LFG in particular, that can help direct you to a map that specifically, you know, has an instance that's running. And yeah, I feel like it's so great because many MMOs struggle with that sense of, well, we have a great zone or a great map, but we don't want that map to only be this one thing in time, unless that's something that like we have specifically chosen for the story or something like that, you know? We don't want the world to feel like it doesn't exist outside of the expansion we released something in or things like that. But metas to me have always been this incredible, like, middle ground in a sense where the map exists outside of them, but then if you engage with and you pursue and you do the event on it, you get that moment, you get that sense, you get that feeling of this moment in time and what was it like and what was the struggle without it having to completely just decimate the map's other traits, features, narratives, all that kind of stuff, right?
So true. It is. They're just. I think. Oh, that guy's floating as well. Sorry. I just keep noticing these floating
poor
people.
client.
I completely lost it. Someone mentioned in the chat as well, just to kind of talk about. Oh wow! I just got a skin I don't think I've gotten before. Oh, it's the whip thing. Oh no, I do have it. But anyway, good rewards. There you go. That's the thing. Really good rewards. So if it's not something you do, definitely do it. And also this one's very cool because you just jump on the little. What is this thing? I don't know. It's like a lift, isn't it? It's a
Hover pad,
big
flying.
chick.
It's Canthan technology.
Yeah.
That's it. And someone mentioned in the chat actually, which is what we're going to talk about because I think we kind of know what they are, unless anyone wants to add to it. The lowest level kind of map meta I think there is the one in Ore, I think, in terms of map progression across the map, as in the typical kind of one, right? Maybe
This is where debate can really come into play because
yes, it depends what
it's
it is.
on what scale are we actually talking about? What is
Well,
the
Worm
lowest?
could be, I guess, as well,
No,
right?
even oh my god, I literally God's Lost Swamp, Shadow
Yeah.
Behemoth, even
Shadow Behemoth.
Shadow Behemoth. I
That's
could
true.
see an argument
That's
for
true.
that. But it's not map wide, but it is an area of the map, which actually is kind of what they did in Path of Fire.
And they
Yeah,
get used to
you
it.
have to specifically go and do an event to spawn it, or it will never spawn. So technically,
That's true. So they technically do get you kind of started before they kind of get you used to it, right? Like used to the fact that this is going to be something in the game. But then as you get further on, I guess what is it? Worm is like the triple trouble thing is what level? Like 45-ish, something like that.
Yeah.
Was Triple Trouble base game or Heart of Thorns?
Base.
It was base game?
Triple Trouble came in a little bit later in season 1, I believe.
Okay.
And then
It's so
they-
interesting.
Why is
I mean,
why-
the
why does it-
evolution.
Okay.
Because the evolution of meta events, I think since the base game itself, we've always had something kind of like it, right? I mean, there is the Centaur meta, which I think really kind of is the first meta that a lot of people will probably
similar, yeah,
encounter or
for sure.
do. So the concept has always been there, but it does feel like, I mean, Guild Wars 2 has never been afraid to experiment with its open worlds and the types of content that they can put into it. I mean, I was even just thinking right now as I watched everybody fly up on the teleport, like the little hover platform, I was like, how amazing is it that this thing just pops up and you can use it, but it's still just a part of the map and I can fly alongside them using my mount and Guild Wars 2, I think, has always had this advantage where the way that they designed the game and the way that they designed these open world zones, there is so much that you can do in them dynamically without, having a million load screens or weird little instance things that kind of take you out or, all these other little hiccups that I think have stopped a lot of other games from how they kind of do these. So with meta events, I guess I personally do think what they eventually evolved into is for sure a set kind of thing, maybe experimented with in the core game, and then kind of played off of with iterations where, I mean, sure, we might get something more like what I would say is a world boss that, has, as opposed to being a larger encompassing thing across the whole zone, it's maybe a smaller scale, maybe has a few little events to kind of proc it in one specific area, and then you get this big fight. To me, there is a differentiation between the world boss and a meta event, which is a much more like extended thing that usually has different phases, that takes you oftentimes around the map, that then culminates in certain fights, mini boss fights and boss fights, and has like a longer chain of rewards that you get. But I think that was really solidified in like Heart of Thorns, and then maybe a little bit cut back on a Path of Fire, but our recommitment to the meta as a piece of distinctive content, I think in Icebird Saga and into End of Dragons really became clear that they were like, no, we are going to stick with this as its own kind of formula. And then we're even going to include some that are difficult enough that, I mean, yes, like end game content for any range of experience or proficiency in the game, which I think is interesting.
Does anyone want to add to it?
Yeah, we've certainly seen meta events grow, and I personally believe that there is a distinction between just a world boss and a meta event. While someone could argue that the God's Lost Swamp is a meta event, I would probably pick with the side that says it's more so just a world boss, as meta events, as we've seen them grow, as what Rook was saying, it is much more...
Sorry.
I love.
We've worked out that Quiet Harold gets
Fornax.
very involved in the game.
I literally don't know how you play and talk. I have no idea how you're doing this.
Stream it. Like, you get used to it after a while. It's
When
just
you're not
stream it.
talking, you do full rotation. When you are talking, you just auto attack. That's
Yeah,
the
you
secret.
you like
Oh.
hit half of your buttons in the worst possible way, and
Yes.
then get downed like 50 times, and just let your brain be like 70% what you're talking about.
Literally.
You don't have to.
enough.
Just hit
Fair enough.
everything. Get something that's like
Pause.
shirt balls. Yes, shirt.
Just play
Um,
Reaper and go into just spam everything. Or just play
And
Mechanist.
balls.
Easy.
Go on, Criff. What are you
But
saying?
as I was saying with the meta events versus the boss dichotomy, meta events, they feel like at times with certain maps, it's almost as if the developers made the meta event first as the map's central storyline, and it is also kind of proliferated throughout the other dynamic events, like taking New Kaining City as an example. The meta event is like the city kind of malfunctioning and all of the Jade tech kind of going awry. And that storyline isn't just in regards to the direct meta event, it's also in a bunch of the other dynamic events around the world, and people and NPCs are continually talking about it. And so meta events, they feel like a grand story quest line of the map. And taking something like Shot at Behemoth, it's more of a small pocket rather than the entire zone storyline, which I wouldn't mind if they kind of went back, if they ever did redo early maps, if we had like events of like spirits and shades popping up in like town areas, and you had to quell the threat of the evil demon spirits, just to kind of have a better through line. Maybe that's what meta events really are to me, is like that strong through line in Guild Wars 2 story and map development.
I love that you
think
brought
it's-
that up. Oh, sorry,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead. No, Fornex, go.
I was gonna say, I think it's more of like a proto. This is kind of like the seed, the idea. Everything else has grown from it. They saw that it worked. They liked that there was a sort of element of requirement of participation in other things, and it's just evolved from there. And I have to completely agree that some of the best storylines that I've played in any game are the storylines where I'm moving through a map and the map is evolving around me, and there's a massive sense of immersion and progression of the story. And so I'm 100%. I love it. The only kind of complaint that I have is because the maps are kind of like static and stuck in time. It's like we're always going to have this event here. I would always advocate to have, for example, being able to do multiple stories on the maps that we have, that they would be instanced. So you can choose to be in the meta map, or you can choose to be in the progression map, and you can always join the people in your group. But we've got all the zoning and the joining and instances and things already. I think the tech would be there, but that would be my, like, again, like, Daddy, I Want a Pony. I would love to see the progression of these maps and have multiple states so that they can kind of be more utilitarian.
Yeah, it's yes. Okay, so there were two things, because when Kroof was mentioning about the narrative, the story, right? I think it did take me a little bit in Guild Wars 2 to realize that, like, especially as I was playing through an expansion, that just like any of my journal entries were an important quest beat that I needed to complete to experience the narrative and experience the full version of the story and the experience of the expansion. Meta events, I started learning like really quickly that they actually were also a part of that. So if I got to the point where I got introduced to a new map and they're saying like, hey, take some time right now to go do some events and stuff, and I noticed that there was a meta or that something seemed to be culminating or that I'd heard, you know, oh, there's a meta coming up, I started to realize that like, if I really wanted the full experience of that expansion, of that story, particularly for certain zones where we just really don't get a ton of actual traditional questing, you know? I think of Echovald. There are several maps, particularly in, I mean, Kiting City to some extent, although we do get quests there. Some of those zones in End of Dragons, though, feel much more like the vast majority of the story and the journey that you take through it is the map meta. So I started just rolling that into like, well, if I get to that point in my playthrough of the narrative, then I'm going to do that meta before I continue on. Of course, you don't have to do that, but I think that I realized that I missed out on a lot if I didn't. You know, like there sometimes might even be entire side characters like an Echovald where really some of the most content we got with them is in the meta that they're featured in. So you have to go through and you need to like actually do that. Or the fact that God, Dragon's Stand is such an incredible finale to Heart of Thorns and works so beautifully in tandem with the actual final instance of Heart of Thorns that if you haven't done both, I really don't think you've played all of Heart of Thorns. Like it's just one of those things, like the story narratively, I don't think that you've played it all.
Do you have to do you have to actually finish that to finish the story? So story instance separate, isn't it? I can't.
It's separate. You don't ever have to do Dragon's Stand. Yeah.
I think they learned in End of Dragons because you had that achievement to do Dragon's End before you went to the final instance, which was an interesting way of trying to do that.
I agree. I think that was really clever. And then to build off of what Fornax was saying, in that follow-up, I do agree in that there are some times where the metas are some of my absolute favorite content in this entire game. I love them. And on some maps, I think that there is a like non-story version of the map, right? So that like reset or that, you know, fresh map version if you're not doing the meta or if you don't engage with the meta, where I feel like the world itself is more... it is more open, you know, like I feel like it's less a set moment in time and more like an actual zone and world. And then there are some maps in the game where, kind of like we were talking about with Kiting City, you really do feel as though, well, I think this whole zone was just made for this. And I think it works really well in certain regards. But I would like to, just like you were saying, Fornax, I would like to have more zones where maybe we do get an alternative or we do get more of an ongoing narrative of the world as a whole and like how the people live and, you know, like those sorts of things, as opposed to just having to be always the setting for some kind of epic struggle. And I think we do have a range of that in the game, but I think... maybe because we don't have something more so like traditional side questing and things like that, I think that it tends to feel less like that. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that. And it feels as if Path of Fire's maps were a potential for them to play around with non-meta maps, and then I think where they dropped the ball was where they did not have us revisit those maps. We very rarely went back to the Desolation or the Desert Highlands, only for very small instances in the living world. Yeah. And if it was maybe a bit more centralized around, like maybe they knew like this map is not going to have a meta because we are going to evolve the story in this map particularly, maybe that would be a kind of an interesting utilization of a map, but it didn't really go that far, so it just fell a little flat.
I am going to die. Sorry.
I know, there's so many shockwaves.
I know, oh my gosh.
This meta can get very hectic very fast.
This was pretty hectic. Well, this is good because it's the first one you actually got a boss that's a scrapper as well. Like they're actually fully like, they went with the whole tech thing with Aether Blades, but they went like classes. They didn't go new classes. They went with like you know, the Scrapper, and he's got like actual gyros and stuff. I'm playing Scrapper right now as well, so it's always cool when I'm like, yeah, there's just massive gyros everywhere and stuff, and there's actual mechanics from Scrapper, like he does the evade hammer on the third skill and does their thunderclap and stuff like that.
Thank God for that.
Rocket charge.
Okay.
Yeah,
I love
rocket
it.
charge, that's it, yeah.
I will say, I think this map
fun.
is a great example of a map that in its just like non-meta state still feels like a robust area, region. It has so many interesting little things. You get a taste of various like culture in different areas and like the training grounds and like all the other things. This map is probably one of my favorites in the whole game because like the meta happens and you can see how it is like how there are things around this map that point to this point in time and that lead to this encounter. But the map itself feels like there is still so many other things to do, engage with, explore, learn about, you know, actual thriving settlements. It feels like it is not just all on fire 24/7 forever, like, and kind of stuck in that of that. Yeah.
We're gonna do Kaineng Blackout, I think, if we can get in there.
Yes. We should be able to.
Let me just see if we
Got
can.
15 minutes or so.
Just want to make sure that if there's an actual map out. I'd have to merge groups if we went there.
Yeah, I was completely listening to all of you. I wasn't desperately trying to dodge all that AoE. I was totally in conversation.
No, I believe you.
What were we talking about?
to Rook's point of the downtime, I think that's actually very important when you're not. I think with every expansion, it would be nice if there was that one map which was like kind of the end climactic battle map. But in Sietung Province, as an example, when the meta event is not happening, you get that moment to really take in the scenery and explore to your heart's content. But even still, there are events and moments, and the NPCs are still discussing the issue of the Aether Blades. So there's always that little tie-in to the meta, which makes it much more sensical when you get to the meta event. You're like, oh, I've been spending this time exploring this region, dealing with the passive threats, and then it really blows up to this very big boss fight. And I think Sietung Province is a really great example of that.
Okay.
But I love me some of that downtime. Just to explore. What happened to jumping puzzles? That's what I want to know.
There is
we
kind
we
of
have
one.
some.
There's an event here, which is the heart, where you have to kind of
You know,
do them.
we
There's
do
not
have a
some.
really great jumping puzzle in Kaineng, in New Kaineng, which I oftentimes forget about, but that is there.
That's in the
New
north.
Kaineng.
Yeah.
There's also a smaller jumping puzzle in Sietung that follows the Tengu path. And that one actually has, speaking of like great little integration of lore, that one actually has just some great stuff, not only from like the Tengu that kind of talks about the pilgrimage that like is made in that area, but also there's like a little chain of events that happens there on its own where you get to see what's happening with certain factions of the Tengu, you know, following everything that's happened to them as a race in Kantha. And like you can follow those little bits of lore and story, and there's like a great little vignette with characters there that are like making a pilgrimage and that get assaulted, and so there's a little JP there that I remember too. I thought for sure that if any place was gonna have a punishing JP, it would be Echo Vault. Like,
Truly.
yeah.
Echo Vault does have something that the other maps don't to such a quality, is like the mini dungeons and the stories
do.
within those mini dungeons. I love those so much.
Yes.
And that they are repeatable. So if you ever want to go and have like a nice little side story and do some solo dungeon content with maybe some other people doing it, I highly recommend that.
Yeah, and there are some like tiny JPs in those little mini dungeons. There's, you know, it's like they're not hard, but you have to like jump across a few little things. And
It's weird though, because like, and we'll come back, we'll pull it back to what we're talking about as well in a moment. But in terms of like, if you think about the map, the evolution of the game, and when jump puzzles are, if you think about the fact that as soon as map like gliders and also mounts started to come in, you start to see less, because it's just less of a thing which is you need. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean they don't make them, but as they started to introduce these things, they started to slowly filter them out, it felt anyway. But like it's more of that part of the core game, I guess. That's my feeling anyway. But yes, Obi did put a link in the chat to actually the meta, like the Guild Wars 2 wiki, where it says a meta event, what a meta event is. Well, it's still a wiki. I guess it's not officially like ArenaNet's definition, but like, I mean, maybe it is, but meta event is a series of dynamic events that tells the story of an explorable zone, which is pretty much what we were talking about. But it includes, there are bosses in there, like just boss meta events as well. So maybe what we count as what might be our typical meta that we say everyone follows zone wise rather than just the bosses. Definitely more specific to that. I guess that's a kind of our definition, but that's mostly what there is only on those. But if you look at how many there are a lot. There are so many. But like, this is the thing about Guild Wars 2 that is very different to other games. The only other games I can really think of that did this was Rift. Rift had dynamic events, which were rifts as well as invasions, because you would actually be in a base and you would be just hanging out, and then all of a sudden it'd be like the fire, I can't remember what the announcements were, but they used to do like, you know, these people are invading the base, and the base would change, like the base would change hands and they would take over the base, and then there would be all these mini rifts and cores and stuff, and there would be mobs everywhere, and they'd take over the map. Like, that would actually be a thing that would happen. They would also attack main cities and stuff as well. It was so good. But like, so that was kind of like a meta-ish as well, but it wouldn't always be like every single base. And I can't remember if they had a boss at the end. Also, okay, the event started. Also, Warhammer Online, I guess, which is where kind of Rift had taken it from. As well, as well as Guild Wars 2, it's like dynamic events, which they had in there from ages ago. Those are the two main games where those events came from. There isn't really any other games that have that. ESO doesn't really, just kind of has world events, which are just bosses, which are pretty easy.
I thought that in the beginning of
Question.
oh, sorry.
No, go.
I was gonna say, I thought in the beginning of ESO with the kind of the invasion of the other realm, that there were gigantic hooks that would come down and a meta event would start, like a mini
like
event
a
would start. That was
in Rift,
like the rift in the rift, but in ESO.
I guess
that's
the big
kind of like that.
The big difference with that is that those were less metas and more, I guess technically you could argue that they tied into the greater meta story about what was happening in the entire world, and like, you know, breaking down the walls between realities and things like that. But they're more standalone. They're almost more like, oh my gosh, okay, you know, in some of the core maps, they put these things in where, like, brand stalkers, you can like you run around and they appear in like a little pocket, and then it like teleports you to where that big crystal boy is, and then you can fight him. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. I forgot about those. People don't do those as often anymore.
I know. They're kind of like those in that they're just the exact same thing. So like, the anchor drops, and then waves of enemies spawn off of it, and then there'll be some kind of little culminating boss, but then that's it. It's like just a standalone thing. You get like a little chest afterwards, and like that's the end, and they don't like tie into each other.
Molag's balls. Anchor, sorry, not balls.
Molag balls. Molag balls.
Molag balls. Anchors from what area is it? It's from Cold Harbor.
Yeah. So this all made me think of a question. Maybe this is actually on your outline, Jeb, and apologies if I'm like skipping ahead here, but it came to me while we were talking about this. I love meta events in Guild Wars 2. I think that they are phenomenal. They're probably some of the content I just run the most all the time. I love them. The spectacle, the rewards, the way that, you know, you get to actually do this huge thing. Like in fantasy, so many times in games, we get this idea where they're trying to find, especially in MMORPGs, they're constantly trying to find these reasons to justify why you're doing things with a group of people when your character is the main protagonist, you know? So it's like, you might have something where it's like, oh, you call in your allies, he, being so cheeky, and those are the people you bring into your raid or whatever it is. But in Guild Wars 2, I love that when they're like, hey, this is a war. Or like, hey, there's a dragon the size of a country. So like, we can't do that alone. So everybody here that has any fighting capabilities has to rally for this. So you really get a sense that they are able to do these fights on a scale, on a level that feels world threatening. And I think in that sense, it makes metas work so well for me, because they're not only spectacles, they're not only, you know, great for rewards, but they also feel like the stakes of the world and of these battles match the actual potential of a fantasy world where these things beyond our scale of understanding in our real world can happen, and people have to use everything that they have at their disposal to fight them. So thinking about all of why this makes me love metas in Guild Wars 2, the question that I wanted to ask all of you is, why do we think we haven't seen other games do these? And like, what makes maybe their attempts, like these ESO chains and stuff, what makes those not as satisfying as metas in Guild Wars 2?
I mean, the funny thing is they've actually started to know that that's the case. It's just the
Yes.
funny thing, because ESO is changing it up completely. Like, we'll find out on the 25th.
And
but,
I have not played Dragonflight, but I've heard that they have essentially mimicked, on top of many things that they've mimicked with Guild Wars 2 systems, but they've mimicked some of the meta event systems.
I hadn't heard that.
Yes, there's like a big, it's basically
Ooh.
a bunch of events that lead everyone to this central like boss, and everyone fights it together. So Guild Wars 2 is a pioneer in many aspects.
I'm gonna pee on your parade now. Sorry. So
Oh no.
Pee away.
yeah. Sorry. Thank you. I don't know what to say to that.
That's something that
I
you
didn't
need
need
to
to give
privately
you-
deal
I
with
didn't
in your
need to-
own time.
I didn't need to give permission for you to pee. Like, you just gotta do that.
You can only pee on
Only
stung by a
consensual
jellyfish.
peeing. Come on, people.
I'll get
We
stung
will
by a
all
jellyfish
pee
real
on
quick.
Cruf's parade.
Yes. But so
Not the piss queen.
Consent matters, fam. Not to yuck anyone's yum, but
And context
oh my
as well.
god.
Context and consent, two of the things which are important.
Oh, there's so many clips. So my thoughts.
No one's
My
gonna clip
thought
it,
is
kid.
that
It's fine.
oh right, oh
during Cataclysm in World of Warcraft, which was like in 1847, they had massive map-wide meta events with shifting states in the map. So you do an event, the map would dramatically change for you right through to the continuation of the story, and each map would end in a, not like a world boss, but in like a meaningful story boss that was appropriate for the map, and it was very conclusionary. That's not a word, but you get the drift.
I mean, it can be
yeah.
conclusive. Yeah,
Yes,
the
yeah,
conclusion
it was-
of the
yeah.
things.
It was a satisfying and contextual conclusion and sort of like ending of a chapter. So that was a while ago. And now there's bugger all wrong with Guild Wars or World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy all like feeding off each other, and I like support that 100% because I think we the players benefit. So yeah.
Oh, yeah,
But,
absolutely.
you know,
It's not
know,
typical. It doesn't feel like Guild Wars 2. It doesn't feel like the Guild Wars 2 system in World of Warcraft, basically. Are you talking about with Dragonflight? Because you played Dragonflight quite a lot, right? Haven't you?
yeah, I have played Dragonflight quite a lot, and they have like lifted wholesale the flying system.
But not the event
and the
system.
mounts.
But the meta system?
mean-
or I think that was what Cruf was talking about.
I feel like it would be impossible for them not to look at this game, which is quietly kind of ramping up and has all these this extraordinary community around it and these extraordinary map banning events and them not to take notice because they are incredibly fun, right?
But they aren't currently in World of Warcraft, is what you're saying. Like, there's nothing similar to it.
I don't know. I can't say that it hasn't been influenced.
That they are. It might not be at the same extent, but it's because, I mean, I think Guild Wars 2's claim to fame really is its meta events because we don't really have that traditional MMORPG support. But with World of Warcraft, they do, and that community is probably still focused on dungeons and raids and PvP and all that. So they don't really have to focus so much on the meta event side of it, but I've heard that it is still more prevalent than maybe in other expansions where people are saying, oh, this feels like Guild Wars 2 because Guild Wars 2's, in my opinion, one of its main claim to fames is its meta system.
Yeah, and I don't think that Fornax was saying necessarily that like WoW didn't have it, but that rather Fornax doesn't have a problem with the fact that like WoW is iterating and taking stuff. Does that seem closer? Like that you're like just like we've talked about on the podcast a lot of times, MMOs bounce off of each other. They iterate off of each other's innovations, ideas. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. It does. I think all of us as Guild Wars 2 players, we have that moment where we smugly look aside and we're like, well, none of you tried Guild Wars 2, but it's been doing this for years, you know? And so, like, of course, it can be frustrating when you see, especially, you know, so much praise for, like, wow, can you believe what, you know, this game has done X, Y, or Z? And then you're like, well, the originator of this idea is right here, and they're still thriving, and they have great content as well.
Yeah.
So, like, totally. But, I mean, I agree, and that I think that games need, especially within the MMO genre, it's so important that they, if they want to thrive, if they want to continue having a competitive place within the realm of MMOs, they have to take note of what other games are out there that are competing for their subscriber base and what trends are happening in the genre overall that players are going to be like, hey, well, if this game has it and they do it, you know, and they have all these other things that I really like, then I'm just going to play that game and I'm going to subscribe to that game. And the same goes for Guild Wars 2. I mean, things that they are continuing to iterate on, look at, and push forward. Meta events, I think, have been one of Guild Wars 2's great strengths. And I know that for me personally, when I look at other games implementing this kind of system, some of the greatest pitfalls for me are when they either just cannot commit to making it a really rewarding amount of, like, you know, rewarding amount of drops, loot, etc. Like in 14, for example, they did experiment in Stormblood with what might be the closest to a meta event chain that we have seen in the game, which is a chain of events in the Azim Steppe known as the Dataki Chronicles, where you can actually get a unique housing item from it if you complete it, and it tells the story of, like, you know, a couple of the tribes and things on the steppe, as well as their relations with the Matanga, which are an elephantine race that live in that region, and it culminates in a boss fight of sorts with a bunch of Matanga that come rushing out from their caves, and you like fight them off at the end as you learn more about the tensions between, you know, the different factions on the steppe. But there's like literally no other reason you would ever do that chain. Like the achievements, you don't get anything achievement wise that really culminates to something cool. The housing item, other than maybe players who want more furnishings that are Azim Steppe, it's not that cool. It's like a banner.
Wow, judging the banner fans right now. I mean, come on.
Well, I mean, it's like a stick that has like a tiny...
Any banner, yeah.
Shafted.
But it doesn't have any reason to repeat it. It doesn't have any reason to farm it. It doesn't have anything that gives you a gil reward or converts into a gil reward. It doesn't have, like, you know, a set of achievements that give you something really cool or like unique titles and all kinds of stuff. So again, they never have seemed like they want to commit to that. And I think some of that also has to do with some of the drawbacks we were talking about, right? Having zones or having metas that can become so dominant that it feels like it dates a zone really hardcore. Like, again, not to say that 14 doesn't have maps that perhaps do feel more dated than others, but they've always, I think, tried to keep the maps so neutral that to some extent they almost seem like pure setting just for the story. And then there's good lore and stuff behind them a lot of times, but there's not really any reason to run them, engage with them, wander them. And while they've tried to put in some things like this system called like bicolor gemstones now, right? Where if you farm fates, which are basically dynamic events, and some of those fate chains might have a little narrative, but again, usually they're kind of just like a one-off thing and they really don't mean anything. It's like a bunch of rhinos are rampaging, kill them all, or like it's usually like that kind of thing, right? So
Kill
like
17 of them, have fun.
yeah, like people will farm them, but it's mind numbing. And like, while you can farm those fates and now get these stones, again, it is not that engaging and it's not fun and dramatic and surprising. Like, I don't look ahead to a new expansion for 14 and go, wow, I can't wait to see what's behind the fates in this zone. Like, they've put in these kind of world boss-esque creatures, which are fun to see revealed, that sometimes play into some of the fates a little bit. But again, there's like some fate chains that will culminate those, which again, I think is a little bit closer to a meta, but nothing near the sheer amount of players that I constantly see in Guild Wars 2, all the way back to old content, that are engaging with metas, running metas every day. Like, it's incredible to me how successful it has been in Guild Wars 2. And so to bring the whole like thing full circle in that regard, I mean, I would love to see more games draw from this, just as I'd love to see Guild Wars 2 draw from other things that other games do so exceptionally well. Because my gosh, the meta events in Guild Wars 2, the first time I ever did Dragon Stand, to this day is one of my high points of MMO gaming. I think about having gone through that, having encountered the gigantic worm at the end of it, and just how that completely lived up in a way to what I had always dreamed MMOs could be, but that very few other games have ever achieved. And of course it gets laggy and other things happen and there's issues and like, it's not flawless, but the fact that Guild Wars 2 just goes for it, I'm willing to forgive all of that, because my gods, if it isn't what I've always wanted from an MMO experience, you know?
Guild Wars 2
I will
commits.
Oh, after you, Crew.
I was going to say something real quick. Guild Wars 2 commits to the meta event system, much like other MMOs commit to their raiding and dungeon systems. It's like that level of polish and care.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I will add is I feel like over the years that I've been playing all these games, because I play like a multitude, a legion of MMOs, I feel like the in-map open world narrative storytelling has just been ramping up and ramping up and ramping up and ramping up. And I feel like the quality of the storytelling on Guild Wars 2 maps has to have had an effect. It must be that, because some of the best open world story content that I've experienced was was way after Guild Wars had kind of had its opening flurry, and like, for example, Suramar in World of Warcraft is an amazing open world storytelling experience. If you ask any kind of veteran WoW player, they'll say that Suramar was absolutely like peak map storytelling for the evolution of like story and character and world as a kind of unit. And I don't think that they could have done it without looking to games like Guild Wars 2. They got too fat and lazy. Yeah, there wasn't enough competition. They were just navel gazing, right? For so long.
The thing is, I mean, and you could even I keep forget. I thought that was the end of the event. It's not at all. Because we're culminating in one path. That's the thing. I mean, the question is then the question which we've kind of already talked about, and I guess many times in Endgame, and what is Guild Wars 2 missing? It's like, you know, meta events are cool and all, but they repeat, and it's content that's not too challenging after a while. And then if that's the kind of Endgame for a lot of people, like, is it as good as having a raid, and is it as good as having all this other stuff? And that's, you know, maybe another conversation we've already had, but with the amount that they come out with and the amount of rewards, and that's kind of what Rook's talking about as well, like, if you can make these things rewarding and they help you to farm and move towards a goal, that's where I think, that's so important. Whereas you need like things from these meta events, right, for the Aurene legendary, right, or for other legendaries. If you go to other zones and do meta events, even from boss events, you can get like rares and stuff. Like that was how most people got rare items before. Like it was meta events, like, or farming for that event was end game PvE. Like it was the end game PvE. There wasn't anything else. It was the dungeons and temples. The temples was like where you got most of your gear from, right? Do you remember that? Like that was like the big thing. There was only
That's
like
where you got your Zerker gear.
Yeah, that or Citadel of Flame. Citadel of Flame was a good place to get Zerker gear as well. And I think the Condi version was what was COE?
Carrion?
Was it Carrion? Maybe? Was it the COE dungeon? I can't remember which one.
Probably Crucible, yeah.
Yeah, Crucible of Eternity, that's right. And the temples gave some healing gear, I think. And Mercy, there was is it Mercy? Not Mercy runes, the thingy runes, which you still have to get from one of the dungeons in there. Which is funny that you're still going to get those from that dungeon. That's actually great. It's so funny. They're the best runes, aren't they? What is it? The healing runes, Monk, from Ascalonian Catacombs. And right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
It's so funny that they're the
I'm
most.
wearing them.
And they're still just in that. Yeah, and you have to do that.
That's hilarious.
They should put that in some other places.
They should probably.
I don't know. I kind of like that it's there because you can just do any dungeon now. Now you don't have to do them.
That is a fair point. There's a little less stress behind it because it's any dungeon.
It's funny though, isn't it? They're still there. It's like a call to the old game. It's like
You can't sell it on the trading post. You can just get it from dungeons. Yeah.
And because it's
very
monk
weird.
as well, it's like, oh, monks used to be a thing. Dungeons used to be a thing. It was like, it's that kind of similarity, which I kind of like as well. It's just like, monks, so you have to go back.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's all about links. That's it. That's what being a therapist is.
Yeah, I think you bring up a
links.
good point. I will say that between, like if we're talking about the conversation of like that one phrase that you specifically said, would it be more worth it to do a raid instead?
Yeah.
Personally, I think that both raids, strikes, metas, I think they are all good, just different. Like, you know what I mean? Like to me,
absolutely.
I wouldn't want them to stop doing metas just so that I could get a new raid wing, like I agree that over time, yes, a lot of these things do become more trivial, but so does raiding, you get a whole new raid wing and you learn it. And then over time, your threshold of difficulty in clearing that raid wing continually goes down as you learn it more, as you get it more, as you have more people who are familiar with that, as you figure out specific strategies, cheats. It's the exact same with metas. And for me, I do find myself much more often just engaging with metas, and I love them for what they are, I did see an interesting suggestion in chat, which is that Dee mentioned, what do you think would maybe like bridge that gap then, comparing something like raiding to metas? Do you think there should be a more hard metas like End of Dragons, or do you think that there should be like a hard version of metas, or like we were saying, if you go back and you have old metas, if there's a new difficulty that you can turn on for them? And it's interesting because I don't think they could just have something like a CM node like they do in raids, just out in the open world for anybody to flip at any time and suddenly make a meta 50 times as hard for everybody else.
Could do it with a guild though, couldn't they?
Yes, like with a guild. I think that would be interesting if we got some kind of new guild hub feature where, I don't know, kind of like you were talking about, Fornax, maybe you could force proc a hard version of a meta map, and you could run that all as a guild.
I mean, we can do like the normal. We can do a couple at the moment. Bosses, we can summon them through guild things, so they would just have to make a hard version, right? Which is what you're saying, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. That'd be interesting.
Which ones can you summon from guild? Which is it? Worm and
Sequatl. Shatterer.
Can you do Worm?
Maybe. I know there's a thing at Tequatl where you can like summon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you can do Worm. Yeah, you can do Worm. I'm pretty sure you can. Triple Trouble, sorry. Right? Maybe?
But
oh my god.
The conversation about meta events, I guess you could in a very strange way, at least my brain like just segments this into this box, but everything in Guild Wars 2 is instanced, and it's not a true open world. So sometimes like I sometimes view maps as almost like a giant raid in a very strange way.
Yeah.
Where some of the maps like Dragon's End or some of the more difficult meta events, I kind of go in with that raid mindset where you have to shift and maybe take it a bit more seriously. And I am a big proponent of difficult meta events. I think it keeps the game interesting. It adds a sense of variety for everyone. It doesn't necessarily lock it behind these like very strange arbitrary gates of like needing a guild and having to coordinate everyone if you want to do it, because they require upwards of 50 players. So I loved Dragon's End. Granted, it was kind of buggy, but once those bugs were ironed out, I really valued it, and I still value it to its till this day. Because some people and some groups still fail. And it's that sense of failure that keeps me on my toes and hopefully keeps everyone on their toes. But it wasn't necessarily a level of difficulty that we were expecting at the time, because it was never pushed to that. And maybe you always got to start somewhere. And wherever you start, people and players might have a negative reaction to it. They might be a little upset because it's not what you expect. But then once you have that initial hurdle crossed and you're like, oh, this isn't like, well, we had Dragon's End. Hopefully in the future, we might see a map meta or two kind of rival that level of challenge and interest.
Okay, I'm gonna nip out and look at my doc and see if there's any questions that there's loads of questions. There always is questions. If chat as well, if you have any questions that you would like to ask us on our opinions about the things, for sure.
Let's do a Doom meta. Yes.
I was just gonna say, I don't think so. We were talking about trying to change like the zeitgeist, trying to change the expectations of MMO players. And I think that if Guild Wars 2 and its sort of ethos had come out, you know, maybe 12 months after World of Warcraft did, then with all these open maps, they're amazing, and then you could have challenged it. But the paradigm of like instance raiding is so deeply ingrained in the community that I think you're gonna struggle to move that needle. I think. And it's not that I would ever want to get rid of map metas. I think they're brilliant. I just think that if you want to challenge and you want the big players to come over and you want Method to be running the CMs, the nightmare modes, then you have to give them a challenge that they have to rise to. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I was just thinking.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, I was going to say, I was just thinking that if we're talking about like, yes, I think that, again, Fornax, everything you said, so on point. The idea of instance raiding, I guess the reverse of this, you know, should we do away with metas if it means that we get raids? The reverse of this would be, do we think that metas are good enough on their own that if we had more like Dragon's End, that we could never have another raid and be satisfied again, right? Again, I feel like it's just always a no, because like you said, at this point, instanced raiding content, instanced endgame content is something that people want. It allows you to get right into the thick of it, to do exactly what you want to do. It allows you, I mean, even challenge modes of strikes, I love, because, I mean, here you go straight to this boss, you do the boss, you want it on hard mode, you do it on hard mode, right? So those players can go in and choose to engage with exactly what they want to engage with at the level of difficulty they want to engage with it at. Metas I love personally because they're like, I love that they're huge time sinks. I actually really like that they take a long time. And I think that part of what, again, makes that feel rewarding is the fact that metas are some of the absolute best gold farming that you have in this game. Like, oftentimes at various points in the history of the game, if you put that time in, you're going to be getting returns for it. And if you engage with parts of it, you know, they've tried to do different things where over the years they've adjusted rewards or chests or stuff like that so that, you know, if you came in at the very end, you don't get exactly the same amount of reward. But you still get something for participating in different parts of the meta as long as it succeeds. And I think all of those things have led to them being very successful. But as I was thinking about it, I mean, I think that metas could be part of a healthy landscape of variety of challenge, right? Because with every game that offers more traditional endgame, they have to create a range of things that entertain players in the meantime, right? So like with 14, for example, we have our 8-man raids that come out, Savage Raids, which are the backbone of raiding content, much like Mythic raiding is in WoW, right? That's kind of your fundamental baseline that the endgame players will structure around. So as those come out, they look forward to those, prepare for those. But in between them, there's all sorts of other stuff, you know? We have these deep dungeons where there's like a challenge mode. There's a challenge mode for doing it solo. There are bonus floors that are really difficult. Are they as hard as endgame raiding? It depends on what you're doing. If you're doing them solo, absolutely. But if you're doing them as a team, no, the individual mechanics of the instance aren't going to be as hard, but they still offer those players something to work towards. Same with like the Blue Mage stuff, which is an additional content that they added in to refresh old raids, which, don't get me wrong, has its own whole list of successes and failures with that. We just got these new dungeons that like are these multi-wing exploratory dungeons that reveal more about a character and have little puzzles. I was getting a flashback to original dungeons in Guild Wars 2 in 14, but they scaled them down, so there's like only, you know, like 4 set paths, and it's very much a guided journey with a little bit of variation and you know, some interesting things that you can unlock as you go through, and there's a hard mode of those, and so you can do those. But again, is any one thing like always at the exact same level of something like Savage Raiding? No. And then there's even stuff that comes out that's harder than that, like the Ultimate Raids, which come out with much greater spans. So all of that to say, I think that they could 100% make metas just a part of the end game and add those optional challenges. Maybe even after you complete the base version of a meta, there could be some kind of like iteration beyond that the most hardcore players, like, you know, you finish it up, you fight like we are right now, the corrupted Jade Behemoth, and then there's something else that's like an extension, that's the extra difficult bonus on the end that if you complete, you get a ton of rewards, so that like a group could do that or continue on, or like we said with guild halls, having something there. Like, I think metas can absolutely be a part of that.
I think one area that would actually be really beneficial, which it would be kind of decoupled from the idea of a meta event, because meta events require so many people. I think if you did that, it would, I don't know if it would really work because it requires so many people, but we have strike missions, and strike missions utilize previously existing set pieces, and they kind of did it in season 1, where you go through the map meta of retaking Lion's Arch, and then they pluck those mobs and put them into a strike mission for a more challenging version of it. So I think strike missions as an idea, we always talked about it in a story context, but in season 1 they actually decoupled it from the story context ties into just more so the map meta, which could be, you know, a possibility. I wouldn't mind it as much, but I know we're always like hungry for raids. But strike missions are kind of that smaller instance to get in, do a bit more of a challenging boss fight and get out type thing. But we'll have to see where they're going with endgame.
The thing I always think about metas is just like the access part of it. You get there. No, are you alive? You will be alive. We'll make you alive if you're dead.
When you say access, do you mean
accessibility is like access? So I guess I have this thing with Guild Wars 2. I'm like, raids are kind of, it's a very general term in terms of casual play, right? So that we know that there is a lot of people that Guild Wars 2 doesn't attract to an audience, and I know I'm veering off, but it's got to do with metas, I guess, a little bit. Like, meta events really do just kind of appeal to a player who is more, I would say, more casual also, but like, you know, people can do these events all day and just do these and they know that there's something going on, right? They don't necessarily want a huge challenge. They just want to kind of farm loot, and MMOs in their kind of basic existence are like you farm for stuff, right? And the emotions that Crichton Herald is going through right now. So really meta kind of gives, these meta events give people a really good access to just end game kind of content, like, and, you know, epic fights and big battles and map wide, you know, invasions and all this kind of fun stuff. And it does feel kind of like end gamey because of how epic it is. So I guess, like, for me, it kind of goes with the, I guess I'm trying to think of not population, but the ethos, I guess, of Guild Wars 2 and who they might be trying to aim the game at specifically. I actually just think their audience has always just not been the World of Warcraft player in a way, if that makes sense. Which, you know, you could argue whether or not that's healthy. But I think that it's also been the fact that, you know, I'm kind of glad that it's not, you know, because we have a very unique, and sure we have our own problems, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on in Guild Wars 2 as well. But there is a very unique part of Guild Wars 2, and that is the community, and it is because I think, you know, a lot of these things aren't
Oh, bollocks.
so
Oh my
hardcore,
god.
I guess. It's okay, Crichton Herald. It's okay.
Sorry.
You
I'll
just
put my
you
mic
will
off.
be fine. Do you know what I mean? So when I talk
You're
about
fine.
access creep, it's more of a very general kind of term, I guess, and it's almost casualness in a way, if that makes sense. Which I kind of like, you know, because I can just
Yeah.
jump into these, and they're not
Well,
that difficult.
I think
I
we
suppose.
all like it too. I mean, I guess this
Yeah,
conversation
yeah,
is in
yeah.
a vacuum of meta events, but I guess
So,
it's like, how does meta event translate to the longevity of a game?
Mm.
I like the fact that the thing we talked about earlier, and people were talking about, you know, the different zones and stuff, and that's what they wanted to do. Like, by living world was the idea that the world is living and you go around it and it's always accessible and it's always alive. I don't think it's just like, it's just the story is here in this one zone and it's always kind of going, you can do these events. I think they wanted the entire game to be a living world. It wasn't, I always looked at it in that way, rather than it's just this story that goes on and on and on. Like, they had this idea that every 2 weeks we're going to have this story and it's always going to be living, it's always going to be happening, it's always going to be alive, right? Whereas I think they always wanted their game to be alive in different areas of like, which is what map metas are. I've always thought of that being their kind of part of the living world, which is very, very integral to the story, the live story episodes, if that makes sense. So it kind of goes alongside it, but it also keeps the world alive, living. And that's because I can't remember who said it earlier, but you said, you know, you don't go back to the maps, right? Much at all. The only reason I go back to anything in Path of Fire is to just go and get hero points. You know, maybe pick up the kills for the Halloween thing every year, for the 10 whatever. And the only reason the maps I've not been to them hardly at all, like compared to the others, like Heart Thorns, we always go back to these things. So I guess it's just like, that is the special thing about Guild Wars 2. It makes you want to go back to these zones. And they've even done it with the legendary weapons, right? You have to take part in the metas. Like in Ore, you have to go and take part in the meta events. And it's like, whoa, okay, so get these different versions of weapons from End of Dragons, from like at that end game, you go to the end game of the core game to actually complete events and get currency, which is pretty cool. It's weird. I don't know. They do that well. I like that idea of like crossing over the different versions of the game, if you want to call it that, or the expansions, and just kind of, you know, intermingling metas with rewards. And yeah, it's quite cool. Just general comments, really, I've got now. There's no point. It's just general comments, really.
I mean, I just want to bring up something that Rookery was talking about a couple of weeks back. I think it was like the thing that this game lacks, and the thing that makes it not as successful as it could be, is the fact that it doesn't have an auto matching system. So it's all very well to wander around and run into these events. There's no in-game indication of when these things are going to happen. You can get a world boss thing, which is fine, an in-game token that kind of like you can teleport to the world boss thing. But these massive big meta events that are happening on the maps, you have to go outside the game to find out when they're happening, unless you're lucky enough to roll up on the map, right?
Yeah.
There's no
you
sort
have
of auto.
no clue.
If I could jump into game, click on the auto matching system and say, oh, I would like to do this, this, and this, and it's like, these are happening. I've got a rolling timer of all the things that are like that are like coming through in the next like 20 minutes, and I'm going to sign up for this as a healer, I'm going to sign up for this as a DPS of my such and such, and then I could go about my business, doing my dailies, running around the maps, having fun, exploring the story, and then whoop, I get whipped away to the dungeon or to the raid or to the map meta event, and then I'm back off doing. That would be perfect. That would be perfect if they had that.
It felt like they kind of entertained some of those systems with like individual maps like Grothmar, as it had a meta event notification board. So some type of system that could
Didn't
just
they do that with
better...
Scarlet Invasions?
Did they?
I thought they,
Maybe.
maybe they did.
I mean, I honestly would love that. Like,
Back in the
Guild
day.
Wars 2's notifications don't have to be the same as other, like, you know, the interface for instancing doesn't have to be the same as other games. I mean, other games, I think about it, okay, well, I unlocked dungeons and I unlocked the strikes and I unlocked whatever. So now if I pull up my instance content menu, I can go to the dungeons tab and I can click on it and queue in and it'll tell me what the wait time is, or I can go to this and then it'll do that, right? But like, it doesn't have to be exactly that. Just like you said, like Fornax, I love that idea because, I mean, even we have played this game for ages. And even we had a moment before stream where we were like, all right, let's look up the timer. So we go to the wiki and Jebro's like, is there a separate category for metas, or is it just like world boss? And we're looking at it and I was like, no, well, you know, like some of the world bosses are affiliated with the metas. So like, oh yeah, that one's a meta and that's a meta. Oh, and then if you go down to like these zones, like if you hover over this, it'll say it's a part of whatever meta. And, you know, like you can see if it's one of the many steps of that meta or, you know, what's coming up. But like even that, you go outside of the game and you have a moment where you're like, especially as a player that's not as familiar with these systems, you know, and you hear something about metas and you're like, that sounded cool. So then you like pull it up and you're like, oh, are there... how do I tell which one's a meta and like so again, if Guild Wars 2 had a unique system like that where you're saying like you don't have to get extraneous devices for this, you don't have to get anything, if they really, I think, want players to have a really smooth understanding of what's available to them, and especially if they may not have as many different kinds of traditional content that can be compiled and then instantly queued into in this kind of way, having an interface like that where, you know, after you had unlocked a map or something in the story, it would then show you like meta unlocked or something, and then you'd go and you'd see like, you know, this meta is on a timer, it queues every 3 hours, and then it would be like, look for group, like this meta is now active, look for group, or you could like click on it and then it would automatically match you with a squad that was running it or something. I don't know, but it would be so nice. Like,
There's
oh
only,
my gosh.
yeah, there's the whole, there is like this top thing in the top right hand corner, but it's always been a problem, hasn't it, that it's just not as engaged, it's not as engaging. I like those map guides that ESO has, and it's got like the different things which happen in the zone and like different things like anchors and stuff and stories that you can access. So that like a map guide like ESO would be good, like with that kind of stuff in it, like the cooldowns and because yeah, I guess like, you know, a lot of people just don't know, but I think do you access, I mean, this is another question, do you kind of access, especially in End of Dragons, like it feels like you're running around the maps and the meta happens like while you're there, like sometimes, but maybe like you do need more. It's not always, right?
Honestly,
it's so long.
I mean, we have the world map. They could do some type of integration where there's like a bar at the bottom and you click it and there's a scroll down menu of like all the currently active. So basically just taking the wiki and infusing it into the world map where it's a toggleable, you know, infographic that just shows where things are when they're popping up, so that you have this easier in-game UI frame that can show you where and when these things are happening. So you can track them. Maybe you can like hit the star button, like there's a window and you like check it. So you have it up in your top right hand corner that has like a countdown timer, and then it'll notify you or something. Like just bake it into the world map itself. I mean, you can hover over these maps and they have like Sietung Province, completion, map bonuses. Like you can play around with the actual map itself to integrate these UI systems.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, the only thing that I would kind of a tiny bit push back on is that you're still relying on somebody to step forward and decide to manage a group and herd cats with strangers in the open world. Hello. Wow. I mean,
Okay.
they need a medal. I mean, if you're wearing the commander's tag, there should be some extrinsic reward for you to get.
Commander
because the
rewards.
amount of times.
I agree. I think if you have the commander tag in a meta, no, I'm so glad. Well, I mean, look, I get that might push more people to slap it on when they really don't know what's happening.
Oh, yeah.
But like, I mean, I agree with you though. I think that if you have it on and you are actively running it, I don't know how they would check that off, but like if you're completing the tasks or if you have people in a squadron with you or whatever, I do think you should get something else. Fornex, I'm so glad that you said that because yeah, I think that commanding is another really fascinating aspect of Guild Wars 2 and meta systems that certain people find a niche in, and like a huge part of their identity in this game is like, I command this meta every day and I have this down to an art. But if you're going to have these systems that I think require that level of coordination, I think there does need to be some kind of reward for players that are taking that on, because that's like 1,000 times more work than what you would just do as somebody who joined the squad,
Yeah, I used to run the dragon stand, and I used to run the lanes as a commander, and the only reason that I would ever command it was because nobody else would.
Because you need the reward.
And I needed the reward, and it's painful. It is genuinely like trying to herd cats, and
it's a bit better now. I'm in dry top, by the way, just doing the sandstorm. It's not necessarily it's not necessarily a massive meta or anything, I guess. But
let's go to dry top. I haven't been in dry top in a hot minute.
Yeah, this is apparently a meta anyway.
Chat Garant is running right now. I just noticed.
I don't know if we can get in there right because it's already started. We could try. Oh no, yeah, at the end we definitely won't get in there.
Gang Wars is also on in Kaineng. I saw a group that was running.
Ooh, okay. Well, Jebro. That's actually a long one as well.
Any other locations we want to explore? I guess End of Dragons is a great example because it's the most recent expansion. Meta events do span across many different areas.
Would Gang War be open now?
Yeah, it should be. Just Equivald. It's always open.
I mean, I
never
saw
had an issue with Equivald.
Yeah, I saw a group that was in Equivald Gang Wars. Well, they're 44 out of 50, the one that's in there.
See if I can go.
The only thing I was going to add was like any time you ever see another player like leading a group in other games, they're either in a guild or they're running it to get specific gear. So it's in a raid situation. It's very rare. The only other type I can think of is like the mentor system that they have. The helper system that they have both in 14 and Guild Wars 2, which is someone putting themselves out there to help new players. Which is actually lovely, and I'm so glad that the game does that and allows people to kind of like have a wing to shelter under. And I think 14 does it even better because they have specific like chat channels set up for new players so that they can ask questions in a kind of more private setting, so that they're not disturbing the entire map, and people who are interested in being a mentor are in there to help them.
Yeah, the mentor system has had its issues in 14, but I still think overall it is it's a positive thing, like you said. And we technically have mentor tags and stuff like that in Guild Wars 2, but again, a lot of other games, I think as well, because they are hesitant to officially acknowledge players that have earned something like that sets them apart in the game, like the special icon or having access to things like that chat channel. Many times games I think are hesitant to do that, because then if you have bad actors who are representing the game in some kind of way that could be in any way perceived as more official than other players, then like having to figure out punishments for that, or like worrying too as well that like new players who have a really bad experience in a mentor channel, because there are some that are very bad, even in 14 that are known to be like bad novice networks and things like that, then again, you don't want somebody to be turned off of the game just because of that kind of experience. But like you said, I think overall those kinds of systems can be huge assets to players. So,
which is kind of an advocacy for an auto matching system whereby it's a random, signed, volunteered for interaction, right?
Hmm.
I'm gonna harp on and bang on about this now. That's it. That's all.
That's it. Oh, okay, fine.
That's it. I think that we need a matching system, auto matching system. I think that it's not fair to expect players to run and devise and make sure that the builds are correct, or make sure that they at least have someone who is more tanky, someone who is more supporty. It's a huge task. It's a huge undertaking. It's a thankless task. It's often ignored. And when everything goes wrong, they can be subjected to deeply unpleasant comments. So I feel like a properly coordinated official matching channel, auto matching channel, would solve a lot of problems and open up a huge amount of content to players who are reticent in getting in touch with others on the map, others, strangers, you know?
We're going to do
That's
Auric
just my
Basin, by
bag.
the way. We're going to do Auric Basin and do Octavan, because it's like
Okay.
at 3 o'clock, just to get in there now so we get everyone. And we'll be waiting like 10 minutes or so anyway, so we're good.
yeah, no worries.
Yeah, I think that we've definitely had that conversation.
Yeah.
We
Many
are
times.
there 100%.
Well,
for sure.
It is interesting in context with open world content like metas,
Yeah.
right? Because again, if we consider, I still love Kroof when you suggested this radical idea that metas were truly a part of the end game. That has like completely recontextualized how I view metas within the world of content in Guild Wars 2. And I like continue to think of that because I absolutely think you're right. I think it is part of the end game loop. So like in that regard, I think that does recontextualize something like an auto pairing system for content like metas, because if metas are a fundamental building block piece of content in this game, then and Jebro, like you're saying, if metas are something that is largely more accessible for players to be able to engage with, then making them as visible and as interactable as possible does seem like a good thing. So Fornex, I can totally see why you were, why those two things I think go hand in hand.
Why I'm
And I
banging
mean-
on about it, yes.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I think I agree with you. I agree with you. It's mostly
Yeah,
what I just
there's
wanted
no
to say.
banging. It's just like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I do have the World Boss
I
portal
admit it.
device, which will automatically put me on a map. And oftentimes I get put on a very populated map and I never actually have to squad up with anyone. So if you are someone who really enjoys doing world bosses, I know they're not necessarily meta events. I would probably recommend, if that is ever on the gem store and you have the funds if you want to pick it up, it is just something that is really easy. And oftentimes if I log in and I don't know what I want to do, I'll just open my inventory and just double click that world boss portal device and take me to a world boss. It also takes you to
true.
Dragonstorm and various other like larger scale world bosses that actually can drop very great items, Drakkar and things like that. So it's actually been very, very useful.
And I suggest something radical about this. Okay, well then I won't, and I'll be quiet now.
No. Do it.
About
My
radical,
radical
but
idea
go. Do
is
the radical.
this. I think that as a new player in this game, when you are like on the maps or whatever, or you go into the map that has like Fire Elemental is one of the first ones. I think if you go on to any map as a new player in this game that has something that would count as a world boss or a meta event on it, that it should prompt something for you that starts a mini quest or like a little mini thing that is the educational thing about what metas or world bosses or whatever are. And I think that at the end of it, which would culminate in you completing your first meta or completing your first world boss kill or things like that. I think that at the end of it, you should just get that world boss portal device. I think you should just get it. And I think that they should include things for like notable points in meta events. I mean, as it is already, there's a ton of stuff that you can do and that's connected to it and it automatically takes you there. But like, if they don't want to completely overhaul the like instancing system or put in something that's like an auto matcher or stuff like that, I think that doing that rather than putting it in the cash shop, automatically, I think it automatically makes it something where your attention gets drawn to the fact that this is a piece of content that exists. And then, like, I would have never found out probably about world bosses or meta events if it weren't for me streaming my experience live and people being like, hey, I really want to take you to this. I wouldn't have found out about them until way later in the game, because it's really just a matter of chance if you come across that thing while you're exploring the game as a new player, and if you even recognize what it is. Like, if you don't know what a meta event is and you see a whole bunch of people running around, you might not even follow that train, although a lot of times
wait a minute, Rick. Are you saying ArenaNet should not hide their game behind convoluted systems? Oh my god, I felt like we've been talking about this before.
So,
again, it's like the event, it's like everything, like all their achievements, right? It's like, again, they do it so often. You're right.
I think that as a new player, when you go onto one of those maps, a little NPC or whatever should come running up to you and should be like, we've heard about a terrible threat in this region and it's a blankety blank and we don't know when it's going to appear, but you know, like keep an eye out for it, or you know, like, or it's, you know, whatever it is, right? And then like a little timer appears or a little quest appears or a little something appears.
As long as it's not ESO hassling, because Jesus Christ, that's mobs.
I mean, just something like that, where then your duty is to get that thing on that map, and then when you've done it, you're just gifted the boss portal device as a permanent item that you have, and that exists.
I think that would be like, Daddy, I want a pony, but that is actually a really great idea. And when they were actually redoing the starter zone world bosses, I think I had mentioned that, like, oh, I love this so much, and it still stands to this day as being a really great update. But I do feel like those earlier maps, particularly the beginning maps, don't really reflect the quality that we get in the later zones. And I would have loved if, as something like what you were saying, when you make a new character and a new player is in their starting map, you kind of have this underlying quest line of the zone for you to go and do a couple events, or like more events are added to show off that world boss. So like in the human zone, like shades would pop up and you'd have to kill them. In the Norn starting zone, there'd be more spawnier and ice totems popping up as dynamic events. The one area that this kind of dwindles a bit is in the Char starting area, because they don't have a world boss, which is so sad, but they could with the ghost. You know, when you fight it underground as the very first personal story, I would love to have that could have been their like world boss for that map. But like the concept of you doing it, and like you kill that your first world boss and you get the tome or the device, and then every time you kill the next world boss, it gets added to like your catalog, and then you can go and teleport to it whenever you want as an account bound feature. I would love that so very much. Granted, I already love it because I had purchased it in the gem store. But that journey, that sense of almost like a bestiary of like you are tallying your accomplishments, and then you're like, okay, so I've done this, and you get like that useful player-friendly teleportation access. I think that'd be great.
We should
That
do
would
Flame
be
Seeker.
so
We should do
nice.
Flame Seeker prophecies.
Okay.
Just do Flame Seeker prophecies.
Yes.
Let's do that,
Yeah.
and then you'll get that.
Yeah.
But it's not the same. It's just a weapon. But like that's what that experience is. That's exactly what that is. It's like you go and learn about the different races and bosses and stuff, and the good guys and the bad guys. But it is a good idea. You could still have it as a gem store item as well, because you can either pay for it or you can go and do the things. I would say that you could even just have it in there still, and you could just, I think that would probably be a good idea. Okay.
Yeah, I guess the paid version could just be that it unlocks all of them to teleport to
Automatically.
immediately.
Yeah, it just does it immediately.
Like,
Yeah.
Like
as long as you have the eligible expansions or whatever. And
Yeah.
They have the
just have it.
the waypoint package where you can just purchase all of the waypoints. So I guess that could work in the same way where like you just purchase all the world bosses.
Because
or
it's just
meta events.
That's how they make their money, right? So you need to it's thinking in that way for Guild Wars 2, which is a bit more, which can be a little bit more interesting because they still got to make the money, right? But they do that, you know. The gem store is the expansions like bump it up a bit every so often, but the gem store is their thing. But yeah, absolutely, it can do that. Okay, so I want to know, what are your favorite meta maps that you enjoy? Or metas?
Any meta.
Which are your favorites? I'm gonna nip to the loo very quickly, and I'll be back. Just we've got like 2 minutes and 40 seconds. We can keep going, but chat, tell us as well. What are your favorite meta events? What are they? Do you enjoy all the things? I'll be right back myself. They will keep talking.
This is a very easy answer for me. It's gonna be very short, sweet. Oh,
Can I?
yes.
Can I just add to the conversation about you two guys talking about the thing? Sorry, I wanted to say it while adding on to Kroof's idea about like a little NPC popping up everywhere you go. They could link it in to the Orders of Tyria, and a little Order of Tyria person could pop up and say, "This is happening, and we're on the case, and go here and do that." And they could all be Ruby. They could all be Ruby in different outfits, like holding your hand and taking you around the world.
Oh my gosh.
That would be so good. Yes.
I love it. I love it. No, that's very good.
Central Tyria lore friendly, and it would like
Yeah.
be a good introduction. Maybe like after level 30 in the zones. So as a starting point, you'd be like, "What the hell is that?" And like, "What's an Order of Whisper?"
No, oh yeah, no. So you have to like unlock the orders, and it would be awesome, like to like because the orders kind of become obsolete.
Yeah.
Once the pact is formed, and it would be nice for them to have a purpose in the world again. And if your order is your portal to understanding each of the new maps and the lore on the maps and the events on the maps, they could really utilize these like underserved characters and have Ruby in the game, because we need Ruby in the game. Because
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
Ruby is in the game.
we need more Ruby in the game. They do need to be Ruby.
You mean Ruby double?
Yeah, double Ruby. Double Ruby all the way. To answer the question that Jebro asked before he left and that we didn't
failed,
answer.
Massively.
You
I
just
did
got back
only
with-
go for a pee, so it was quick.
Did you? Never mind.
So you
Nope.
Didn't have a
I'm
lot
not
of
gonna
time.
say-
You
Was
didn't have
I
a
in
lot
I
of
was
time.
about to. I was
No,
gonna
you
ask
weren't,
you.
Griff. You were here. The evidence is that you were on camera when this
I
was
felt
happening.
a light trickle on my forehead.
That's
And you just did.
not me.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Okay. So aside from being not Groove,
Whose face is just like
It does
nonchalant.
great for the skin, you know, and the feet. It's really
Okay,
good.
all right. Steady on there.
my favorite meta in Guild Wars 2.
No judgment.
Or my favorite metas. Dragon Stand. Dragon Stand is just always my favorite. I love it. It's so good. I will never get over the final moments. It's just so amazing. I just love that fight. I love everything about it. It's very cool. Dragon Stand, but I also really enjoy Dragon's End. Wow, I really just like all the ones that have dragon.
My answer was going to be any map that starts with dragon.
They're
map
standing
that
or
starts with
ending
dragon.
or they're sitting
Dragonfall,
down or
Dragon
they're
Stand,
having a cup
Dragon
of tea.
End.
That's,
Dragon filing their taxes.
Well, they can't do-
I'm waiting for that map.
they can't do anymore though because they're all gone.
It's
Well,
true.
kind of.
Well,
I do
True.
also love what was mentioned in chat. I really love the metal concert. I think that one is so
Yeah.
funny and it's so good and it redefines
It
what a
is
meta
fun.
can be, and I would love to see more metas even like that that
Yes.
aren't necessarily just like huge battles, but again, like we were talking about earlier with Fornax, right? Like things that tell the story of a people or a culture or a zone or a region that can be fun in like a different way and have different steps and things like that. I love that too. So those are probably my favorites. I'm trying to think of any others specifically. I do actually like this one. I think this one is really cool, and the landscape and setting is so neat for it. But yeah, pretty much the dragon ones for me.
The dragon ones, excellent.
All the dragon ones for me too, but I really want to highlight Verdant Brink. I don't think we have seen a map
Yeah, I
meta
like that one.
that has really mimicked Verdant Brink's idea of everyone is split up everyone it's very spread thin across the map. There are so many camps that you have to guard, and I love playing that one because in many situations the map metas, you feel like you are kind of lost in the greater ocean of players, but with Verdant Brink, everyone's so spread out that you are kind of with your trio or your squad, and you're trying to defend this location, and they have to go out and find resources to build up your defenses. I stan Verdant Brink very much so.
You stan it.
I stan it.
Okay, good. Sorry, I was just looking at the progress, and I was like, West is normally the slowest, isn't it? On this autobahn? Of West and South. Oh, South isn't always.
No, South is usually the slowest. That's the one you have to push back.
Oh, okay, get it.
My God, I've got so much muscle memory for this map.
I cannot remember what to do here at all. I'm supposed to go to mushroom thing, but I can't remember where to do that from. So, over here. Here we go. All right,
The little fairy dancing circle.
That's right. I love it. Oh, these guys are so awesome. They're one of the best mobs in the game. Especially, well, actually, the worst when you have to fight them because they're a pain in the ass completely. Fornex, what's your favorite?
I have to agree. I think Verdant Brink. I mean, so I've got a soft spot for the Silver Waste, which is kind of like the oldest new type of meta map, where it's just one map and it has a sort of like a singular purpose. But yeah, Verdant Brink was just amazing. Going up into the canopy, all the dragons. Like, oh, it's just amazing. It's just an amazing map. And people being completely and utterly lost on that map, not knowing where to go, how to get up, how to get down. Hilarious.
Oh my God, that was the worst when it first came out. I was like, I do not know what to do. I have no idea. And like, there is no indication on what level they're in sometimes either. And it's really confusing. I think they were still trying to work. They got better as they went. Oh God, I have nightmares from that map, honestly. Like, especially of hero points. I'm like, it was so good because when it came out, I remember we had the early access to it and stuff. Oh crap! Forgot to do the evade. Damn it! Every single time.
I do want to give an honorable shout out to Drizzlewood Coast, which I actually really love that meta. I enjoy that it has, like, they decided to play around with format and to emulate World versus World, but in a PvE environment. I love that, and I really enjoy how the story of that, like, it fits so well with the concept of the Civil War and this struggle between these like large scale forces that are clashing. But then it also is just so great because I personally really enjoy that it almost feels like it has these multiple chapters, you know? You resolve everything that's happening down in the south, you push your way up, you claim the bridge, you push into more hostile territory, and then for the whole thing to end in this massive keep with this battle against like the ice champion there at the end, Claw of Jormag. I love that, honestly. I think it's really cool, and I think the story and narrative is so well done in that. I enjoy running that one. So
okay, is it my turn?
Yeah.
Yes.
It was going to be Drizzlewood Coast. But Rook said free, so I'm like, okay, fine. So I'm going to go again. I really like Ore, like in terms of just because it was, damn it, my inventory, please. This is the worst one for this.
Yeah, this one is a big inventory clutter.
I don't know if, or in terms of like all of them combined, because it feels like you're doing it, it's like Drizzlewood Coast, because you kind of go across the region and you defend and attack different areas, and there's temples and stuff, and then you got the wizard towards the end to get, you know, the dungeon control and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of like that, because do you have to, and actually, as like an old school memory, Citadel of Flame, you have to do that event to unlock the dungeon as well, right? Or is it the waypoint? I can't remember.
It's the waypoint.
It's the waypoint. It's not the dungeon? Oh yeah, I
It's
guess
not
you
the
don't
dungeon.
have to do the
Citadel?
dungeon.
Wait,
Did it used to back in the day though? I thought it
Oh,
was.
for ore.
Maybe.
Are we talking about
maybe.
ore?
Oh, I
Citadel?
went from ore to Citadel Flame as well.
Oh, the gate will close if the event is up.
Right, if the event is
Oh.
up, so you have to do the
Yeah.
event to
Right.
get the gate. Right, okay, cool.
It still is like that, which is very older design and sometimes annoying.
I kind of like that because it was
I
it
do,
was
but
like
I
one
kinda
of those. I don't like it now. Now I don't like it because it's time consuming. But back in the day, it was like we would get all our guildies together and we would go and like make sure the event was done so we could go and run the dungeon like a lot so people could get their berserker gear for World v World. And it was like this whole thing. It was cool. But there's
But it's
so
one of
many.
those timer metas that it's a countdown and not just kill a
Yeah,
boss.
true.
Ah.
True. But in terms of like, I think there's many like the metal band one is really cool. I love the way they did that event very differently. They actually did that whole Living World episode very differently, didn't they? Because they advertised it using partners as well. Because they sent us all posters. I've still got my poster somewhere. I was gonna frame it, but like. It was like a poster for a gig that you like back in the day when you used to see like posters up in like shop windows
I
and
just
stuff.
threw mine away
Why?
because they were just like,
Yeah.
I do have a lot of things that I just hold on to, so I'm just.
I
like,
saved mine. I have mine. I'm a good partner. Unlike
that was
Cruz.
the only thing that I threw
You're the
away
best.
because it was. I also accidentally ripped it when I was first opening it, so
Oh wow.
because it came in like an envelope type thing.
Yeah.
It was taped. It
It was hard backed though.
and
Anyway. But there's
my
many. There's
gosh.
really many. I like the bosses as well, and just like there's just a lot of good, solid meta events. I think I don't do them as much. I definitely tend to do them more when I'm farming for gold and stuff. So that Drizzlewood Coast is really good because it is so big and it feels less repeat. Like I feels less like I'm repeating the same thing over and over again, even though I am. It just feels like different areas, and I forget them sometimes because I'm just like that. And it's just fun. I don't know. They are good times. But again, metas aren't really something which I frequent the most in the game as well. So they're a little bit more new. I guess they're still kind of fresher to me. But this one I've done a lot because again, there are a lot of metas which you do specifically for rewards, and for you needed the keys and everything for this for legendary armor. So the metas you had to do so much, especially Auric Basin. Like I've done this one a billion times, but like I forgot the strat on the west thing because I would always go to the easiest one and just kind of AFK. And I'm just like, 'cause I just did it so many times because you need the
these are
Auric
fun.
stuff.
May I take a moment
You're a
to
naughty
shout
streamer.
out?
Shout out. Go.
Just because I know that no one's going to say anything about this. Path of Fire. I want to take a quick moment to shout out the Forged with Fire meta event in Istan and also the
Forged with Fire.
Desolation meta events.
What was the Forge of
the-
Fire one?
It's the one where you go into the foundry and you fight Tamor and Tagon, Balthazar's hounds.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's cool.
No one
I
has
think I
ever done it.
remember. I just,
Or everyone did it like once, and then everyone was like, okay.
oh, what, in the temple?
No, in the foundry.
Is it on now?
In Path of
I
Fire.
can't
You don't even know
remember.
where it is.
I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't know where it is. Like,
It's
you
like
tell
I
me
would
a
love
name.
to shout this one out, but I don't even know where it is.
I want to
or,
shout it
like, what
out
is.
because like they are actually very well made.
Yeah.
But I also want to take this moment as a public service. The Desolation, the Maw of Torment event has been bugged for like 4 or 5 months.
But you're
and I've
shouting
tried
out
to
a
do
bug in
it.
the game.
I've submitted bug reports and it has not been fixed. And it's one of the 2 map metas on the Desolation that you can kind of run to get amalgamated gemstones. And fun fact, Path of Fire is the only expansion to have 2 meta events that give you the champion chests. Most other maps just have 1, which was kind of cool for Path of Fire, but it has been bugged for months.
Oh, dear.
And it will not succeed.
Oh no.
And I've tried to do it 4 times, and every single time it gets stuck at the very beginning and you can't do it. So I love Path of Fire's
shit.
map metas despite everything, but
A dev may see this, so that is. That is
I've
fair.
sent bug reports and it's like it's so sad because it's actually a really fun meta event.
Oh.
It's really good.
Is there anyone else that wants to talk about a bug report that they have? Actually, Drakara's not been on for that long. Maybe 11 minutes. We won't get into that, will we?
Try. I want to do shout out for Drakar in that I really enjoy Drakar's fight. I really think it's cool the way that he moves through the ice and like the culmination of a lot of things in that, and when he jumps out and his animations, and I really find that fight down in the ice cavern to be really memorable to me as far as like thematic stuff goes. Is it like the absolute most riveting like gameplay ever? Like, no, I mean, like usually you just gotta try and get up as close to him as possible to avoid the cone stuff and things like that. But I still do find that fight really fun, and I like just the way that it feels, and like taking somebody new into it when he pops out of the ice for the first time and his shadow, and
we can see it now. Go do it, because we can do it. We can do it. Sorry, the only reason I'm interrupting is you can go do it now.
But I love that, and I even like that you have to use the Raven portals and stuff like that. Like I honestly think it's memorable to me. So even if like the rest of the things that lead up to that, I'm like kind of unforgettable to me, or kind of forgettable to me, but like that fight itself, I think is very cool.
It is. Hopefully we can. I think I can get in. It looks like we can. Yeah, there we go. It's on. Nice.
To Drakar.
Drakar indeed.
Back at the beginning of Icebreath Saga, where we were starry-eyed and had such grand ideas about this living world experience. I gotta say, it started out fantastic.
I know. My hope.
We have now
my hope
concluded
was...
that Jebro is the pessimist, but other news.
No,
I was very happy.
I'm very hopeful. I am very hopeful, but like Rick will tell you how I felt at the reveal of that. Like I was in a place. I was just at the reveal.
Jebro was in a place. We were at the reveal thing together, the reveal event, and the event was so great. I really loved it. I really enjoyed it. They had things set up so fantastically. I remember though, it was funny because funny, I guess you could say. I ended up recording some footage that I didn't end up using because my editor unfortunately ended up like just having a huge delay and a lot of real life stuff that happened. So like by the time we had actually finished the video covering the event, it was so far past it that I was like, I don't even know if it would matter. It wasn't that late, but I know I should just release it at some point, even just so that we could reflect on it, or we could talk about it on the podcast or something. But like I had an interview in there with Roy and Jeb about our takeaways from the announcements and everything. And I remember that whole time I was like, it was like pulling teeth trying to get the two of you to be optimistic.
Our faces were just like, I think because we were just like PvP as well, like, and it was like, what is going on? Like, I think there was a lot of similar reactions.
Should have been there. I would have given you the sound bites.
I would have loved it, Kroof. I would have loved it. You would have done so much better than both Roy and Jeb.
Yeah, you would have done me. Like, I just can't. I can't lie. I just can't. I'm just like bad at it. I'm just like.
What's funny to me is that by the end of it, I think all of our sentiments ended up being correct. Because I was very much of the thought that we would get an expansion, that like there was going to be an expansion and it was going to happen. And you and Roy had a lot of thoughts about what had been announced about the Icebreath Saga that I think eventually did end up panning out as being true, because the Icebreath Saga has some real shining moments, and there are parts of it that are so good and so well written and so animated. And that like first map is so good. Yeah, I think I also look more kindly on it given everything and the expansion and stuff like that. But I think some of the critiques that you both brought up at that time, or worries or concerns you brought up at that time, were also valid insights.
I can't even remember what it was now, though. Like, what I was worried about. I think it was just because we didn't get much other than, like, this is the Icebreath Saga, and that's kind of, this is the story, and that was it. Like, I think it wasn't just, there wasn't really anything about any other features, and like, well, I think I was still on the hope of like PvP and like bringing back that a little bit more as well, and there was like nothing, and there was, so I think it was like, because it was that expectation of, oh, maybe it is going to be this expansion. And there was like a different living world. And it was like, well, we could have just had a guild chat with that. It was
yeah.
like,
The,
I don't
the
know.
spectacle was great, but it was very interesting that they would have such an announcement for a season.
I
in
know.
retrospect. But
And
it's
yet-
fine. It looked good.
We didn't even get an event. I mean, pandemic was happening. We didn't even get an event
Yeah.
for an actual expansion.
The
End of
Pandemi Lovato.
Dragons.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah, the
hoping that
panini.
like maybe this year, I don't know, this year, next year, I don't know. We don't know yet. We don't have many details about
Yeah.
the like whatever the next expansion is. But I mean, if they were going to be kind of keeping pace on expansion release in like next year, you know, every 2 years-ish kind of thing for a lot of MMOs with expansions, I would hope that maybe at PAX West this year we might get an event. You know, we got an event that happened, but it wasn't like a big reveal event or anything. So
But it might be.
But we'll see.
I'm wondering if it's gonna be too early for that. I don't know. Maybe not.
I don't
Maybe
think
not.
so.
I know, as Diaz
Could be
pointed out in
something.
chat, we have gone on yet another tangent.
Oh
as
yeah,
always.
crap. Sorry. I mean, there were loads of meta. We're talking about meta events
Icebrood
in
Saga.
Icebrood Saga anyway. So we're just going.
And for what IBS was, I will say for the limited maps, they were all knocking it out of the park. I
Yeah.
have, like the initial event at the start of this map was really captivating. Drakkar is really good. Drizzlewood was also part of the Icebrood Saga, which we have really big praise for. So they did pretty good on the event side. So they did good.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's a lot of parts of the Icebird Saga that I adore and I run all the time, and the metas and the events. I mean, I think in chat there was a mention about the first half of this map and the fact that the meta there is a little lackluster, which like I would agree with. But here in Drakkar and the culmination of how this whole zone comes together, I do really love this fight, and Drizzlewood Coast, the meta there, I think is so fantastic
And
too.
because it's from like Guild Wars 1, right? Like it was Drakkar is, right? So like they wanted to do that. There was a whole thing about this, wasn't there? They did the promotion quite well as well for that. Like they did, there was like these teaser trailers and stuff. I remember there was just like a bunch of stuff which was pretty fun around this, because I wasn't really that au fait with what was going on at all. I was just like, oh, we're doing Guild Wars 1 fun stuff again, and I don't even know what the hell this thing is. And like people are telling me that this is a really cool creature and stuff, and I'm like, damn, okay, what is this thing again? But then I got to find out, and it's like, okay, this zone's actually quite cool. I like this zone. I didn't spend that much time in. I got it all unlocked, but I don't remember spending that much time here, other than maybe just doing Drakkar a couple of times, I think. I don't know. Anyway, not important.
I do really enjoy that. Is it this one? Or is it the first half of the meta that opens up that mountain area that's all covered in snow? I think it's the first part of this map.
Yeah.
And then there's like a chest run back there. I love those moments in metas where, you know, other inaccessible parts of the map become open. We just saw with Auric Basin, right? When you do that treasure victory lap down through the gleaming golden, you know, like parts of the underbelly of the city, that is just so cool, and it feels so perfectly iconic to me in regards to, you know, I don't know, like Indiana Jones or like that kind of genre
yeah.
where you get to go down into the hidden temple and there's all this stuff there. And I mean, obviously now there's a lot of discussion to be had about just like taking priceless artifacts from culturally significant like religious sites or etc. But in the name of a fantasy game, and the fact that like in Auric Basin, I mean, they're all chill. They're like, cool, you saved us, so come down here and have all this treasure. Have a
It's
great
just
time.
payment. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's fine. But I really like on that map that you have this whole part that's been inaccessible to you. And it has such a cool name too. It's like such and such as Legacy, or hold on, I gotta go look at it really quick.
Yes.
Asgear's Legacy. So I loved that was all there. I would have loved it even more if there had been something like really cool up there, like a hidden building that has a bunch of additional lore, or like you know, if you run it X amount of times and you go up there, you can gain access into something, like a hidden area back there or something. And I remember being really captivated when I first did it, and I went, oh my gosh, I can actually go back there? What's the legacy? And then it was just kind of like mountains and like there's a treasure chest, I guess. But it didn't feel quite the same as Auric Basin, but I still love that concept, right? And I mean, even with Dragon's End, although I really wish that they had put these more in the actual quests themselves, I love that, or that the end state of that map lasted longer. When you clear it, you know, you have that new collection, that NPC that you can find. You have the extra dialogue with a certain somebody that you can get if you go down to the Cradle of Existence. So I always think that's pretty cool.
What?
Wait, what?
Huh?
No,
Someone's not into a strike mission.
we're not doing strike mission.
Huh?
I have a letter from my
Oh,
mummy,
that
but
pop-up,
don't have
I
to do
gotcha.
those.
Where
Yeah.
was this guy? Yeah. Bye-bye. Okay. Random. Stop. Hand up.
Oh,
High five.
oh, too many people went inside of walking shirt balls.
Oh, I see. Well, there is a workaround. I don't know if we have somebody that's doing it, but if you have a mesmer,
Yeah.
you can do the port, and then that bypasses the limitation
I think
on
people
amount
do
of
that
time
now,
that you
don't
can go
they?
in.
Maybe.
I think that's
Hopefully.
pretty common, yeah.
I didn't see anyone else like going, and then I was at the front, and then everyone, and I just saw like a ton
Yeah.
of why did that guy go down?
They usually put for
Just
the
died.
second and the third gate open.
Okay. The bit I like the most is when it is on top of the bubble that's protecting you, and there's that very physical connection between this bubble and you feeling like you're actually in danger. When it first happened, it was like, that is pretty cool. It is good. This is good times. It's a good meta event.
It's a great boss. It's a great boss. It's really
is.
grounded. It's
It really
everything
is.
anyone could want, isn't it?
It's that
It's
danger
grounded in the
thing.
law. It's spectacle. It's yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's just the idea that you are in peril. Like this thing is bigger than your screen, like unless you've got phone access screen. But even my monitor, I'm like, wow. Even like I've got like a big monitor, I can't see the whole blooming thing because like whatever angle you go at. So there's really big, like the sense of size and enormity and urgency and is pretty cool. It's it's enjoyable. That's why I like these events, and we'll run around in Tresorwood Coast maybe after this, but we're not going to be around for that much longer. But really, if there's anything in chat that you would like to ask us as well, we're going to be going off probably shortly after this event. But like, I mean, if you're a new, go on. You have a question?
I have a question.
Sure.
Where do we think meta events are gonna go, or
that's
where
good.
can they go? In like, of course, we have the season coming up and the next expansion. What do you think is in store for meta events?
That's difficult.
Do you want more of the same? Do you want less
do
of
you
the
mean
same?
do you want, or what
Exploratory?
do you think we're gonna
Like,
do?
what do you? I mean, want and think are like kind of the same because it's all speculation, kind of. But
want and think. Is want and think the same though, Croof? That's the question.
I think. I mean, I want to see them continue to play with meta event formats. I think Icebird Saga, them mixing in that world versus world mode was so clever. And we've always had metas that have like unique mechanics, but I like the idea of players really having to kind of go, hey, well, this isn't just going to be, I look for every event that just has like some enemies and I just kill them and then I just keep going, right? I like the idea of adding in unique steps or recontextualizing like the metal concert did, and deciding to go, hey, like let's actually have these kind of fun, ridiculous things, like you have to mosh and then you have to fix this stuff or you have to whatever it is, right? So I want to see them continue to play with that. I think that if meta events are going to expand, in my opinion, not only do we have to look at a range of difficulty, but I think we have to also look at a range of unique, experiences, unique mechanics, and challenges to group coordination. I mean, earlier we talked about Verdant Brink, right? And how interesting that one is because you are spread out. For having a huge amount of players, you're spread out so that your forces have to strategically thin themselves to deal with a lot of different things on different fronts. So I just want to see them play with the fact that in these large scale encounters, you have this many players, you have groups and subgroups, and you can, have multiple commanders, you can have multiple efforts that you can coordinate. And I'd like to see a range of difficulties. I even think that something that Fornax brought up earlier would be really interesting in that it would be cool to have a meta that almost happens on an alternative version of the map. Like the Upside Down in Stranger Things, right? Where a meta starts and you're like, cool, and you start it up and you do some things, and then everybody who is in the meta gets like warped into a dark side version of the map or an alternative version of the map or something like that, where then your experience exploring this place is different because it's suddenly a different hostile world. And like you have to figure out like, oh my gosh, wait, in the normal version of the map, this thing is just like, it's a temple or something, but in this version of the map, it's become this whole other thing. I think that could be really interesting, and that could also do something that would lend itself to kind of like, I expect that we'll see things, at least in our next living season, kind of like Iceberg Saga, where we have maps that have these multiple parts that are released, right? Because they talked about the fact that that's probably better for their workload and variety of content production and stuff like that. So, they do something like that, even playing around with the idea of multi-stage releases, where you get a version of the map that's kind of like what Fornax and I have been hoping for, where it's like, here's all this lore stuff or side questies or things like that. And then when the next portion of the map comes out or the next thing comes out, rather than having to add a whole other map, entire zone kind of thing, you get this flip side of it, or you get this other thing, or you get the meta. I don't know. I just think it would be cool.
That's a cool idea. I like that.
Okay.
I personally wouldn't mind seeing, like in an expansion format, maybe there are 5 maps to the expansion. I would not mind seeing one of the maps not have a meta event and instead have more traditional quest lines and or be utilized and kind of in reserve for future living world content where they morph and change the actual map. Just to make it a little bit more of a living experience rather than a time-locked map. And then also Vernon Brink. I love the format of playing around with group sizing, because most of the time in meta events, everyone's kind of together, pushing at the same time. So I wouldn't mind seeing a bit more of like thinning of forces, various levels, puzzles, in addition to bosses and stuff. I think that'd be cool.
What do you reckon, Fornax?
Personally, I love what they've done, and I'd like to see them continue. I love these open world maps that require a very kind of loose consolidation of players. I really like it. I'm kind of my problem is that I want the game to be not just like a critical success. I want it to be an overwhelming financial success as well for the longevity of the franchise and for us, the players who love it. And so I'm always my angle is always so much more in the commercial, meeting expectations, sort of catering to a wider player base rather than the kind of the niche that it is at the moment. It's a beautifully maintained like walled garden, but for the health of the franchise, I think it needs to kind of broaden its horizons. But I don't know whether they want to compromise the principles of the game that they have invested so much in for that commercial success.
That's an interesting conversation which we should definitely probably have, actually, because it's like, okay, I'm not gonna go into that question because I could do I could definitely do it, because it is I think they actually just won't do that because of that exact point. Okay. Go on.
Oh, so I was going to say, but in terms of what I would like to see, I would like to see multi-levels. So I would like to see an open world format of these world bosses, and I would like to see a guild format specifically for guilds that they could pop that is a little bit more difficult. Maybe it's got a few more mechanics. Maybe it gives specific guild rewards. And then I'd like to see like a raid or strike group version of these maps that's that's an instanced version of them, like a strike mission, which has the appropriate rewards, so that they're getting a lot of bang for their buck. So that this one piece of content could have different mechanics, it could give different rewards, it could open slightly different paths, and off it goes, right? That would be my thoughts.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good idea. I think just kind of the same. Just evolve, keep going. Like I think I'd like the Drizzlewood Coast ones. I'd like to see more of. I think just really enveloping these side stories more. I guess, and as well, like it doesn't necessarily have to do with the main story of the metas, but like more of just the character of the map, which are kind of done with a lot of them anyway. But it just being more of a specific map story, like, I guess, if that makes sense. Which is what a lot of them are already, I suppose. I suppose they're not really all specifically like just main story. Obviously they're like offshoots of them. I really like the separation. I guess the lane thing is quite cool, but I like the Kainang one where you have those two separate places. So I like that idea that you're not all just in one location. But I'd actually like some more fights where the final fight is like different locations as well, rather than just you all come together at the end. I think that would be a nice way, because I think we've kind of had a taster of all of the different ideas they've had so far. So I think I just like some new envisioning of what the meta could be, and even if it's just bad. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, no.
Like,
Yeah. Try.
Even if when I say bad, I mean it doesn't work, because at the end of the day, like what we know about ArenaNet is that they're innovative. They don't want to do the same thing all the time. So like that's why I don't necessarily want to see the same thing. The same thing is fun. Like this is okay. This is cool. But I would like to see more innovation and just see them innovating, because I actually don't care whether or not their stuff is good sometimes, as long as it's new and different and it's another take, because they're only going to evolve and change off of that. And we've seen how they've done that in different places. So I know they'll get there in the end. And I'm not saying that it's, bad is not the greatest word in the world to use, but like, you know what I'm trying to say. More innovation. Just keep doing it. Keep being experimental. That's my big thing with them. I would just like to see that be the continuing path for ArenaNet, and I'm sure they will be, as they have been.
We talked a lot about at least several of us have that really love quests, right? I think we've all touched on it at some point.
I like the questies.
I like the idea though that there have been problems in other games that I've seen where, they've tried to put cutscenes in or stuff like that, and you oftentimes can't do those sorts of things mid-content, right? And Guild Wars 2 has a great solution for that, which is that they do immersive action storytelling, but sometimes in the moment, it can not always frame things in the way that's the most, cinematographic. You can miss stuff, like there's a lot of things with that. So I just had the thought too, while we were going through this, that one of the solutions that I've seen work in other games is to put that kind of content like after, either before or after something. So, we talked a bit about, what if they do a map that's just quests, or what if they do a map that's just this? But then we've also talked today too about the fact that like Path of Fire maps that didn't have metas, almost nobody goes back to them anymore, or things like that. So,
or they're bugged.
And because they're not really run, people don't do them, or there's not as much of an impetus to fix it. I don't know, but I do think that there's a solution as well to merge these things, that you can tell these incredible dynamic stories through metas, but then maybe after you complete that meta, and it would have to do it in like a super visible, super obvious way, but like after you have completed that meta at least once, it unlocks some new quests for you or something in a zone, where then, like I think about the Gang Wars meta in Echo Vault, where if after you ran that once, then you would have the option where you could almost go in because, hey, you fought alongside or you fought against or you did these different things, right? And you could talk to the major NPCs there and start a quest chain and have additional things that you could do in that zone that would give you more insight and cutscenes and other stuff like that into those figures that you had fought alongside or against, or learn more about that. So I hope that we do see them continue to kind of integrate in many different levels what they do so well, like these meta events, but then also grow, like we were chatting about, grow in other areas where I think they can go more heavily in a different direction in certain parts of their storytelling. I think they can give us, more directed things like that. And I think that there is a way to create maps and zones that don't have to feel completely bound by the need for a meta, but that can even, if they are going to do that, use that to kind of transcend or add on or continue to be implemented into the overall flow of the narrative and the story and our understanding of the world in a way that does what Guild Wars 2 has always done so well, to make you a part of the action, and give you meaning and resonance within the world. But I think that that's really what I want to see for the future, to see them continue to build on what they've done so well. And I don't want to see these events go away. They don't need to be massively overhauled, but there's so much that we can do to play around with them, to make them surprising, interesting, and to continue to tie them into the greater world and story in such a way that, if you haven't done it, you don't feel like, I don't know, like to make it something that's an organic part of our story flow, if that makes sense, as opposed to just a thing that you do that does tie to the story, but that otherwise, doesn't give you a ton else outside of that one meta, that one instance, that one thing. I don't know. In my head, that makes sense. And I feel like it could be something they could play with, and how they kind of format it and continue to integrate it into the game. Maybe that's the way to say it.
Well, I think we're going to kind of end it there, honestly. It has been a fun one, peeps. I'm trying to find more stuff in game to show off as well. So chat if you have any suggestions, people in the comments as well on YouTube, wherever. Give us some ideas of what you'd like us to talk about and see in game. We're going to be back in about 2 weeks' time. Next week I'm not going to be available, so it's a break for these people. It's a break for all of you. I know you're going to be
by then we'll have a roadmap.
Fingers crossed.
It's going to come out next week. And if it comes out next week, I'll do a show on the weekend. I'll do one on the weekend. If there's a roadmap, I'll do it on the weekend, I promise. And I'll see who is available. Don't worry, peeps. We'll talk about it if it comes up.
I have no life, so I'm totally there.
Okay, fine. We'll see. Otherwise, for next, what do you do? Where do you do it? Where can people check you out?
Hey, I'm Phonex. I'm the Crichton Herald. I make Guild Wars 2 content on YouTube. I keep threatening to do Twitch. I don't know whether it's going to happen. Maybe 2023 is the year for me. And I love the podcast. Please support all these beautiful, wonderful people who are lovely and awesome and amazing. And hopefully see you in the next couple of weeks.
It's okay. My PC is apparently taking off.
Oh.
I don't know what's happening right now.
We have liftoff. Oh, the stream done. Oh no!
Oh, when it stopped, it cut off.
No, the stream's going. It's on my other PC.
It just lagged very, very heavily on my
end. Please, I don't know my PC, the gaming PC is going on. Just do an outro. Go. I don't know what's happening to that. It's just having a time. Can you hear it? It's just that's the noise, but you can't hear it. Okay, good.
Oh, when you talk, we can hear it.
You can hear it when I talk. All right, go. Outro's quick.
I guess I'll go. Hi, I'm Crow. Thank you so very much for watching. I have a YouTube where you can go and watch some of my Guild Wars 2 videos. I also stream here on Twitch. Schedule might change going into the new year, but doing a lot of Guild Wars 2 and other MMOs, playing some Final Fantasy 14 again. Very exciting. And thank you so very much for having me on. I had a blast.
Excellent. It stopped. I don't know what happened. I was meant to be getting some new fans, but apparently something happened. I don't know. I'm gonna have to go find out what I was doing. It was the radio fans. Supposed to be getting some new ones, but they've not sent me them. Thank you, crew, very much indeed. That's fun. Oh, my brand new PC. Who have not done? Rookery. We do eat it.
Hi. I'm Rook, aka Rookery. I am a huge lover of MMORPGs. I love the story, lore, characters, world in particular, but I do everything in the game from casual to hardcore content. And I'm a big and avid role player as well. So if you're curious about anything that I do and the big feelings that I have about MMORPGs, you can find me on twitch.tv, Rookery, spelled Rookuri. You can also find me on YouTube at Rookery, as well as on Twitter at Rookery_.
Awesome. Everyone, if you do want to come and check out the stream live while we're doing Lightbringers podcast, 1 p.m. Pacific-ish on a Friday. Also on the weekend, I do stream as well, Saturdays and Sundays at times. Still maybe playing around with YouTube. We'll see how that goes on Sunday. Might do a Twitch stream Sunday, might do it alternative weekends. We don't know yet. But there may be a podcast episode next weekend. Just hang out in the Discord and Twitter and follow and you'll find out. And you won't have to just be here randomly in the chat, alone in the nether. Sorry, you can do whatever you want. Actually, you can if you want. It can be fun. Otherwise, I've been Jebro as well. Make sure if you do want to support me and all the things I do, as well as putting together this podcast with all these lovely people, make sure you please go and follow them. I'd massively appreciate it. Otherwise, thank you so much. We will see you next time on Lightbringers podcast for episode number 40 of the season 2. Should be fun. We should probably do a big one. Oh, that would be cool, actually, if it was a roadmap. Ooh, hopefully. Do a emote pray for me in the chat. Throw something like that. I don't know what. No, bye. Go follow other things. Do it. That was a great intro. Outro. We're going. We're not staying. Bye.
Go. Nailed it.
Nailed it. This is still the outro, so you can say something like bye if you want.
Help me, I'm blinking 3 times.